Good morning, Commissioners, Chief Moore, Mr. Teefank, Madam Secretary, Mr. Inspector General, Mark Smith, Mr. City Attorney, Carlos de la Guerra, and members of the public. Today is Tuesday, June 13th, 2023. It's 9:30 a.m. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Please let the record reflect Commissioners Briggs, Southers, Shields, and Soboroff are present, and we have a quorum. Mr. President?
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We welcome everyone attending this morning. All public comment will be heard during item number 2 on the agenda. We will dedicate a total of 45 minutes to public comment. Members of the public will have 1 minute per agenda item for a maximum of 2 minutes total. At the request of the speaker will be given 1 additional minute for general public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes total. The order of the speakers will be the speaker in this room will go first, then we will take a speaker watching today's meeting on Zoom. We will alternate between speakers in the room and Zoom for a total of 45 minutes. Members of the public who participate in the public comment are reminded that they can speak to any item on the agenda or matter within the jurisdiction of the Board of Police Commissioners. Public comment is your opportunity to address the board, so you are free to express your opinion on matters before the board and to generally express when you disagree with other opinions expressed. However, directing your comments to other individuals who have spoken or attacking others who have expressed their opinions shall be deemed off topic, and your public comment period will be concluded. Members of the public, if you choose to participate in the public comment portion of the agenda, you can participate in this meeting in a number of ways outlined on the agenda. For those in the room, please submit a speaker card to one of the officers who will then give the card to the board secretary indicating you wish to speak during the meeting. For those of you on Zoom, please raise your virtual hand. This is a reminder for those who are present today in attendance at this meeting. Disruptive behavior will be cause for removal. If you disrupt this meeting, you will be provided with only 1 warning to cease disruptive behavior. If you fail to cease such behavior, you will be removed from the meeting. At this time, we're going to go to item number 1 on the agenda, the report of the Chief of Police. Good morning, Chief Moore.
Good morning, President Briggs. Thank you, Commissioner Southers, Commissioner Shields, Commissioner Soboroff. Welcome, and Mr. Teefank and Mr. Inspector General. I will do as I do each week. I'll talk about significant events, any categorical use of force, crime, and our personnel strength. In regards to significant events this past week, I want to draw attention and my appreciation to Commander Ruby Flores and Commander Shannon Paulson, as well as a group of about 20 other members of the organization who gathered and participated in the Pride Parade with myself and others. It was a well-attended event, very festive, and a great occasion for Los Angeles to show the world what unity and values of inclusion and openness to individuals from all walks of life prove as to the model, if you will, during times across this country that at times can be very divisive, and we hear retreat, if you will, from basic civil liberties. Sunday was a day that I was proud of to be an Angelino. This week I also started the PGA U.S. Open Championship at the LA Country Club that will go through this coming weekend. We currently are staffing that each day to ensure the safety of all individuals involved. It will draw between 8,000 to 22,000 spectators, as well as the athletes that are there. It is an event that is viewed across the world, and one that we believe will showcase LA as a world-class city. More disturbing news is that instances that occurred this past weekend in regards to street racing and its impact here in Los Angeles, its continued plague that it forms to our communities. You'll hear a presentation today regarding our efforts to counter this, but I want to just briefly identify that this weekend's efforts included uniform details as well as investigative resources from the LA region of law enforcement agencies, not just LAPD and LA Sheriffs, but others as well. And our collective effort was to disrupt these street racing gatherings, these sideshows, the dangers that they pose to public safety, and also take enforcement actions. This week, for instance, on Sunday, we saw a group of off-road vehicles gather in the 6th and Wall area of downtown Los Angeles in an effort to conduct these street sideshows and these displays. And their reckless actions in our effort to intercede, eventually arrested an individual who was possessing a ghost gun, an unserialized firearm, as well as took enforcement efforts against others that were involved in this display, of this reckless display and endangering community safety. Later that night, we saw at the 6th Street Bridge just outside another sideshow or street exhibition, and then later at about 1 o'clock in the morning, Florence and Normandy. Again, in each of these instances, our officers responded. Our efforts are to identify these early on before the large gathering of crowds so that we can intercede without endangering officers or others. During the course of this, in addition to the earlier arrest for the firearm, we saw 19 citations issued, as well as 17 of the vehicles impounded. When we look back at this year, what that means is that nearly 400 calls have occurred for street racing across the city, involving nearly 2,000 citations being issued. More than 100 spectators have been cited. We had 6 guns recovered from these sites. This is to demonstrate that these are not just purely celebratory presence, but they pose a real danger to the community safety as well as to the spectators and those that are actually involved. Additionally, we had 11 other felony arrests and more than 330 impounds have been made. Our efforts will continue to hold accountable those that engage in this reckless acts, as well as to seek additional consequences for those that are involved in this. We believe that the continued impound and seizure of these vehicles are needed, but we also believe that stronger sanctions will help deter these displays and these reckless acts. In regards to our crime picture, let me just say as quickly, in regards to categoricals, there were no categorical uses of force, including officer-involved shootings this past week, which brings us to a total of 10 officer-involved shootings this year versus 12 last year. Our 4-year average is just over 14. We've had five fatal officer-involved shootings this year. Last year, that number was 4. Our 5-year average is at 5. So our reduction in officer-involved shootings year-to-date compared to previous years continues. In regards to our crime picture, this last week was a difficult week in regards to shooting violence, including homicides. We saw a significant increase in homicides from the previous week. Previous week, as a reminder, we had 2 homicides citywide. This last week, we had 10. When we look across where those homicides as well as shooting violence occurred, they're primarily focused in the central and south bureau of the city. When we look at and they also included 3 instances that happened in our community safety partnership sites, which is an unusual high incident number. When I look at the numbers of those, we also had, in addition to the 10 homicides, we had 30 shooting victims. And those 30 shooting victims, 17 of them were in South Bureau and 12 were in Central Bureau. So again, these were high instances in a relatively small area of the city. The consequences of this was real in the sense of loss of life and endangering. I want to draw particular attention to 2 very tragic ones that were involved in the overall 10, because many times these are just numbers to many people and they don't represent the true loss and the true casualty of violence that we see in the city. When we look at the instances of the homicides, one occurred at a burger stand on the 7th of June, and it occurred in the southeast area at an Avalon location. There, a mother was attending to her 8-month-old child when a gray Kia came alongside and began firing weapons indiscriminately. By the grace of God, that 8-month-old child survived. However, the child was struck by one of those rounds. That is an ongoing investigation. It's unclear what the motivation or what contributed to this incident, and we're asking for the public's help and assistance. The second event occurred, which has received much more media exposure, involved the tragic death of a 16-year-old named Quincy Reese. He was attending a flyer party at the 7400 block of Western in the 77th area on Saturday night when, for unknown reasons, the gathering outside this location at about 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, a dark SUV pulled alongside, and individuals from inside fired on this group. And as the group fled, unfortunately, Quincy was one of the individuals, one of the tragic victims of this, and he fell and died at the scene. Our investigation is ongoing in regards to identify the persons responsible for this terrible murder and the loss of life of him, as well as the dangers imposed by these other shootings. As we enter the summer months, I'm concerned about this recent spat of violence. And while overall our crime picture is good, we have seen a 26% reduction in homicides this year versus last. And this morning I heard recurringly, frequently on the news, how crime in the city, both violent and property crime, are down. But what that is, in regards to last year, that is true. We have a 3.6% reduction overall in Part 1 crime, and our violent crime is down 11%. And these are very impressive figures. And the trend, both in shooting violence and overall violence, as well as property crime, is going in the right direction compared to last year. But as I've frequently spoken before this body, when we look back to our 2019 year, which is our waterline for the pre-pandemic era, we still see a 5.3% increase in homicide and a 16.5% increase in shooting victims. And what that means is that's 73 additional individuals who have been shot in the state of Los Angeles compared to the same period in 2019. So our work is still cut out for us. I'm proud of the work of our men and women that are working on the investigations, on identifying, by working with our community, tips and leads that allow us to identify those persons responsible. Our clearance rate for homicide is well over 70%, but there's still far too much violence, and we need the community's help, not only in the instances I bring here, but in the larger context of just those that are preying upon the community. Also, as we enter the summer months, it's going to be critical that our outreach and engagement continues. There's a startup of the Summer Night Lights program, which will continue this summer as it has for more than a decade. Will involve young people and families gathering at parks across the city, more than 40 locations, where officers will be in attendance and will be available and will be engaging in this community to ensure that they have a safe and enjoyable summer nights out in our communities. Also will be critical is our continued work by our Gang Reduction Youth Development Department within the Mayor's Office. Those in that organization, which works with our community intervention workers, is critical to our collective success as we see their work in countering acts of further retaliation or acts of further violence, and quelling rumors, and also finding paths of jobs and other opportunities for individuals to engage in productively rather than engaging in this type of actions. In summary, our violent crime, as we see reductions this year versus last, property crime continues. Again, we'll ask for the public's continued work with us. And again, I want to recognize the hard work of our organization, working with our other law enforcement partners to identify those responsible for these violent occurrences and other serious offenses and bring them before the criminal justice system. Regarding our personnel strength, our number, as I reported last week, would be updated. It is now 9,030 sworn personnel. That's a reduction of 37 personnel from the last time I reported. That's 430 underneath our sworn deployed strength. As far as authorized strength, our civilian personnel deployed stand at 2,620. That's an increase of 2 from my previous report. That still has us, though, 85 staff underemployed in regards to our civilian. Those civilian positions are critical to our success. I remind the public that whether they, for job opportunities that exist, or both as police officers as well as many other professional classes that can work throughout various parts of the organization. And our critical need is both in our sworn ranks as well as those civilian staffing positions, which far too often have a sworn member fulfilling that critical need for the absence of that civilian professional. Our reserve officers has been no change with 430. I'm grateful for their volunteerism, as well as our cadets stand at 1,182. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chief Moore. Commissioner Shields, any questions for Chief Moore?
Yes, thank you, President Briggs, and thank you, Chief, for your overview. I had a couple questions. One relates to the rise in both homicides and shooting victims in terms of if the department is doing anything differently or more in light of this trend in order to combat that violence.
Well, I wouldn't call it a trend yet. When we look at the last 4-week total, our numbers were very promising. When we look at the previous, so last week we had 10. The combined 3-week numbers before that were 8. So we have seen a significant, I want to call this out because this is a clear outlier. Last year, interestingly, the same week, we had an identical increase. When we look at the nature of these homicides, the majority of them are occurring outside. However, we have had some occur at some businesses, unlawful businesses, that saw shooting violence. But the vast majority were occurring in a street setting. And we do have clues and tips and leads, and arrests are being made. However, the key here is to counter the loss of life is by, again, having effective outreach and engagement and countering the impacts of why people would engage in this type of felonious assaults.
And I just had one additional question, and this was something that kind of came up at the last commission meeting, and we've been seeing more in the news in terms of, have there been any arrests made in the Satakoy Elementary beating? And in terms of, we've seen in another city within our county, kind of similar protests and beatings happening in connection with Pride. And given that this is Pride Month, what's the department doing to make sure they're prepared for any similar protests and taking action?
So I believe you're referring back to the North Hollywood area that had the dispute involving conflicting or contrasting protests involving the reading of a book. And I'm proud of the work, as I indicated in a social media broadcast, of both LA Unified School District as well, and their police department, as well as us, that were able to stand between those two groups. And members that acted irresponsibly, but allowed the expression of First Amendment, but those that acted aggressively and committed crimes, that our officers interceded. We are working with the individual that has been identified as being knocked to the ground. There's been varying accounts regarding the severity of that attack. But I will say that there was no one standing by. I've heard verbal accounts that our officers only faced one side of the protest, and we gave somehow our back or an allowance to the other side. That is absolutely not true. There's many other, and we attempted to counter that with a legitimate demonstration of images that were captured that showed actually officers facing both ways. They formed a skirmish line between the two, and one group of those officers faced one group of protesters, and the other group of officers faced the opposite side. So they were the thin line that kept these two groups apart, and they proved very effective for the majority of the event. Unfortunately, towards the end of it, as the crowd size slowed and began to disperse, there were people who I believe were hell-bent on acting aggressively and attacking physically another part of the other group. There were people who were soliciting that type of work. And our efforts, again, to de-escalate and to safely have that resolved, we're not as 100%. But I do believe that our presence there countered what would have otherwise been a very violent outburst. Again, for anyone that was there that felt that the officers' actions were wrong, we welcome the opportunity to hear from them, and we will investigate it. But the body-worn video and the visual accounts that have also been provided by the media, I believe showed restraint by the part, and professionalism by the part of our officers. They remained objective, and they did not incite or encourage or somehow acquiesce or allow other individuals to violate the rights of others.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Commissioner Shields. Commissioner Soboroff.
Chief, can you talk a little more about the fireworks that were found? First of all, a couple of questions. It was $700,000 that cost, $2 million worth of fireworks. How does somebody sneak that across the border? Number one. Number two, what were they? Were they just fireworks? Were they M80s? How dangerous were they? And how was this? This was appropriately handled, but can you go over any of that?
So last week there was a report involving the identification of a cache of commercial-grade fireworks that were packaged and being stored in an impromptu type warehouse facility in the Newton area, South Los Angeles. 38,000 pounds, 18 tons of material. A fire inspector actually discovered it as I understand it, during a building inspection, a customary standardized inspection, called us. We immediately began a response, contained the location, put into a series of steps consistent with our policy, which was to transport the material off-site and out of the city for eventual destruction at a safe location. That took much of the day. Additionally, our efforts of our work included notifications to the council office as well as through the chain of command. And we also pursued a criminal investigation, which I am asking yesterday, happy to report that felony charges were filed by the district attorney involving the individuals responsible for this collection. Now, the reason that material is there is plain and simple. Too many Angelenos engage in buying illegal fireworks, engaging in reckless actions that endanger the safety of their neighborhoods as well as themselves. This is a heightened period between now and the 4th of July, our nation's birthday, in which people will be drawn to firework displays, which will occur throughout this region. They're free to attend, commercially held, safe, and a wonderful opportunity for people to enjoy our nation's birthday. However, far too many others believe that it's okay for them to purchase these illicit fireworks and to then display them or use them in their neighborhoods. They endanger not just themselves, but they also are supporting criminal enterprises through the purchase of these illicit firearms or fireworks. Now, where they come from is a host of places. One of the challenges we have in California is that in the county of Los Angeles, there are far too many municipalities that still sell quote-unquote sanctioned firearms. So those are one way in which people look at this and believe that they should be able to do this in the city of Los Angeles, despite the risks that we see from fireworks for fires, as well as the dangers to individuals who are using them. Unfortunately, also, it's because these are quote-unquote safe and sane, or their use is meant to be safer than other fireworks which are readily available out of the county of Los Angeles, including in our nearby states. People travel and they see an opportunity to make money, and they make a substantial amount of money. And they'll take something as simple as a rental vehicle, a van, and they'll fill it with tons of this material, and they'll transport it back to the city, store it in a location, many times in a residence, in a garage, in a backyard area, in very dangerous circumstances where heat or friction, or just the nature of the instability of what are also homemade fireworks, pyrotechnics, pose a real risk to public safety. So our work will continue. We ask the public if they suspect individuals in their neighborhood that are purveyors of this danger, that they would notify us. They can do so via 311. There's a 311 app that they can make that report online. There'll be a record of that. We will investigate, as will the fire department and the arson unit. We will pursue prosecution against those involved, both at the street level as well as those traffickers. Lastly, we will have a press conference on this as the 4th approaches. We ask Angelenos to, as adults, to act responsibly and to model the behavior that they want their children to grow up and follow themselves. This is activity that should be avoided, and one should instead attend our sanctioned firework displays that will be occurring across the city.
Thank you, Chief. And it goes with saying or without saying, either one. Thousands of people, and children, babies, adults have lost eyes, have lost limbs, have lost fingers, have been severely burned for life because of stupid, unlaw-abiding parents and neighbors who engage with these. And I hope that this year is that it's taken very seriously what the ramifications are. And what you just announced this morning about the felony charge I think is a good message of seriousness of this issue. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Soboroff. Commissioner Suthers.
Thank you, President Briggs, and thank you, Chief, for the report this morning. I'd like to go back to the Department Personnel Strength, if you don't mind. I'm just trying to understand what our actual number of deployable officers are. So I'm curious about two particular categories. Number one, and if you can't answer today, if we could come back, how many officers are out IOD or injured on duty? And then the second question I have is how many are in an RTW or return to work status? I just want to understand what the department's doing to support those officers while they're at home, and most importantly, what's being done to get them back to work.
Okay, thank you. So we will get you the exact numbers, but there are more than 600 of our personnel that are either temporarily or that are temporarily disabled and unable to be full duty. In the return to work section, that's a subset. There's a subset number. What that means is that when a person is injured in the department, and this is work that involves at times physical conflict, that involves an officer going out and being involved in a foot chase or perhaps unfortunately an altercation or otherwise, and they do suffer injuries. And our effort in any injury is to get them prompt medical care and of the highest quality, to ensure that that medical care meets all of their needs, and that they're and it is a workers' comp matter. So obviously we make reports to Cal OSHA, and there's also internal supervision of this, as well as medical services within the personnel department. Now that officer will see a doctor immediately, and that officer will be placed either on light duty status, meaning that the nature of their injury, a sprain or strain, still allows them to conduct work outside of a field setting. Perhaps they can work a desk, or they can work a front desk, or an alternate assignment. There are other officers that the nature of the injury is so severe that they actually are placed off duty, fully temporarily disabled. Those officers, again, more severely injured, could be a broken bone, could be a back injury, that the best course of rehabilitation and recovery is for them to be placed off duty entirely. For a 6-month period, officers can be in a light duty status as our efforts to get them fully recovered through ongoing treatment, physical therapy, and such. After 6 months, in agreement with the Los Angeles Police Protective League, those officers that are still light duty status are placed in an off-duty status, meaning that they're sent home, still covered by injured on duty compensation. An officer has 1 year's worth of benefits, if you will, to help them during a period in which they're rehabilitating. The return to work section is a component of the total number of officers who are temporarily disabled, and it represents those that have been off more than 6 months. Our effort by sending those individuals home is to ensure that they have the full focus and energy to recover. Because our effort is that within 2 years of an injury, is that they're able to be fully recovered and back to work. In the absence of that, then the officer must seek a medical pension or some type of retirement in separation from the organization. The department doesn't have permanent light duty positions within its ranks, in its table of organization. So when officers are injured, our first and most critical need is to get them the necessary treatment and attention so that they can recover, not just for their work performance, but for their life and their home and their family. And then there's these other processes that go to the timing of that, so that the level of attention that's necessary. And I'm proud to report the vast majority of people who are injured in this organization are able to get the necessary treatment and recover very quickly. In a matter of sometimes their return the next shift, they're on a light duty status. Many others are injured to the extent that they can still go out and do full duty work. But there is a subsegment, and I will say across in LAPD, as well as our counterpart with the fire department, as well as the fire and police profession, that since COVID, in this last 3 years, we have seen an increase in the number of individuals that have had incurred an occupational illness or injury, and also the increased number of those that are away from the workplace. We welcome an opportunity for us to come and provide more detailed information. The strategies of the organization, both in the management as well as ensuring that they have the necessary treatment and help and assistance to allow them, again, to restore their ability to work, but also to ensure that that off-duty, that these are officers that can have a productive and enjoyable life, both both within their work here, but also at home.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Commissioner Suthers. At this time, we're going to go to item 2 on the agenda, public comment. Madam Secretary.
Okay, the first speaker is Jacqueline Guerrero with an interpreter. And she's speaking on item 5A2. Yes. The microphone, sir.
Va a ser un año el 7 de julio.
It will be a year on July 7th since the incident.
En el incidente donde él perdió la vida.
The incident in which he lost his life.
Lo que nosotros estamos en desconformidad fue de que lo que después pasó cuando él prácticamente ya estaba sin vida en el piso.
What we are dissatisfied with is what happened once he was already on the ground, lifeless.
Y todavía, aún así, tirado en el piso, lo esposaron.
Even though he was already down on the ground, he was still handcuffed.
Cuando él ya ni tenía, ya no se movía, no nada, estaba 5 balazos, 5 disparos en el pecho.
He wasn't moving anymore. He had 5 shots in his chest.
Eso es el descontento que nosotros tenemos, la familia, de la forma como actuaron el oficial o los oficiales que lo arrestaron ya estando en el piso.
That is the dissatisfaction that we're feeling, the family, all of us, the way the officers treated him once he was already down on the ground.
Cuando pudieron haberle dado los eléctricos, sí, o tirándole a las piernas, pero no fue así, le disparó directamente al cuerpo.
They could have tasered him or they could have shot him at his legs, but it wasn't so. They shot him in his chest.
Es todo lo que nosotros tenemos que decir ya de eso. Aparte, mi hijo andaba mal porque él estaba en medicamento.
That is all we really have to say about this, but besides that, my son wasn't doing well. He was on medication.
Y tenía días que no tenía su medicamento. Andaba todo descontrolado, mentalmente desubicado, y tal vez eso fue el motivo de lo sucedido, de lo que pasó.
And he had been off his medication for several days, so he was out of control. He was a little out of it, and perhaps that was the reason why what happened.
Es lo que yo quería decir, eso que no estamos de acuerdo con la forma, pero a ver ellos qué opinan también.
That is really all I had to say. We really do not agree with the way it was done, but we also want to know what you all think.
Ya es todo.
That's it. That's all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maria. I'm really very disappointed the way how things were treated and done. I feel like the police, is here to protect and serve. You guys way have it, but the way that how it was done shouldn't have been done that way. You guys are here to protect and serve, but you guys are not. I don't know what happened that day. I had no idea why my brother had to be handcuffed while he was lying on the floor with blood multiple times in the chest. I feel like you guys could have done a little better. The officer could have done a little better. If he's actually trained, he's as a police officer, he's trained when these situations, these confrontations, these conflicts come in. But that's all I really wanted to say. Like, try to work a little better when situations like this come, because a human life was taken away. And I understand the cop was trying to defend himself, but he could have done better. That's all I want to say. He could have done better. As a cop, as a professional, he could have done better. I really can't, it's hard for me to express a lot what I have to say. But if you're here as as a police officer and you're mentally trained, you should know as a cop that if someone's not doing well in the right in the mental state of mind, I feel like the guy should have known. He should have known better. That's all I have to say. Okay?
I'm sorry for your loss and for your mother's as well, and I'll assure you that this board is going to hear my report today in closed session, and the report that I give them will be provided to the public. But our family liaison unit will also walk you through that and talk about and address an effort to address some of the points that you've raised.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Manuel Payares. I'm the brother-in-law of Felipe Guerrero. First of all, I just want to say, he was a Marine. He was in the service. He served this country. Unfortunately, due to the circumstances, he came back with PTSD. He got lost in the world. He couldn't get back up. So therefore, mental issues came into place. And when the first call that the LAPD received was because he was hurting himself. And I feel that the necessary steps were not taken to assist him. They should have called somebody else to try to control him, and it was due to all the stress that he had and all the mental issues that he had due to serving his country. My brother is in the military. He's been serving for 22 years. My brother-in-law, he went to Afghanistan. So I'm very familiar with the stress of being in the military and coming back and dealing with the civilian world. It's unfortunate the way that the LAPD handled, the call, the way that they handled, relating the message to the family. The day that he passed, the day of the shooting, the family found out through a friend, that couldn't locate my brother-in-law. The police didn't even have the nerve to give the family a call, but they did release his name to the press, and that's not the way a family should find out what happened. I feel that the LAPD felt that he didn't have nobody, that he was lost and he was just a soul, in the street running around. And it's unfortunate that that's not the case. He served his country. Unfortunately, he came back. His mental state was not where it should have been. And like I said, the way that the family found out of how it happened, it wasn't even through the LAPD. You guys didn't take the right, steps to inform the family of the situation or how it happened until the family called the LAPD. But you guys did release his name and information to the press and release the online, of the incident. I just feel that, when there are situations when their people are suffering, and mental, you guys should take different steps or approach them differently. His life could have been saved, but unfortunately it didn't happen. And yes, the family did see the iOS video, and they saw the way that he got treated after he was shot, and they do feel a little bit, discomfort in regards to that situation. But I do feel that in the future, you guys should really look into, mental issues and, and try to help out people and don't approach them, and especially when you guys do get the call saying that there's a person in the street hurting himself, but that's all I got to say. I mean, I just wish things would have been different. I wish you guys would have done it differently. I wish you guys could train your officers a little bit better and try to find out, and instead of like going with full force. But I mean, what it's done. We can bring them back. There's nothing I can do to bring them back. There's nothing the family can do to bring them back. I just hope that, you guys do something about it. And on the report, you guys do give a full detail, because the family does want answers. You know, they don't have any answers. They try calling the department. The only thing they tell us, oh, you guys have to wait for the police report. You guys have to wait for the full detail report. It's been a year. They don't have no answer at all. You know, and it's not fair. You know, it's not fair for a family that's grieving. It's not fair for them to go a whole year without knowing what exactly happened. You know, but that's all I gotta say, and I just hope you guys, we're all human here. You know, you guys, you know, he was a son. You know, we're all human. You know, I just hope that you guys don't see him as just as a person that was lost. You know, at the end, he was a really good guy. Like I said, you know, the military did something to him, and it messed him up, and he couldn't get back to the world.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please go to the next speaker.
Next over Zoom, we have caller ending 1264. Caller ending 1264, you're on. Okay, we'll move on to the next Zoom caller, Angelina.
All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I wanted to thank Deputy Chief Hamilton, Commander Embrick, Captain Lozano of Foothill, and Captain Bennett of Foothill, and also Major Crimes for coming out last night to our town hall in Tahunga. As you probably are aware, there were up to 30 car fires set on fire by an arsonist over a 4-month period from February to May. The victims and the neighbors were so frustrated because LA Fire Department kept telling the victims it was just mechanical failures, even though they were happening on the same block and just days apart, and even finding bottles near the engine. So the neighbors decided to reach out to LAPD. So I want to thank LAPD. Within 1 week, the arsonist was arrested. And that was because of Captain Bennett of Foothill, who contacted Major Crimes. And we believe the arsonist would still be out there if it weren't for LAPD and Captain Bennett, even though it was really on LAFD's shoulders to investigate this. I also want to make a note that Monica Rodriguez, our councilwoman, who is also the chair of public safety, she never made a statement or sent her condolences to these victims, the up to 30 victims that we have. And, you know, these victims were, they work in Tahunga. They have to take a bus now all the way from Palmdale to work. And one was an amputee who had just come home from the hospital and was excited to drive his truck using his prosthetic. And then another man is in the hospital in and out for a few weeks now because of the stress of his car being set on fire. Moving on, I want to talk about the Pride event. It's interesting, Chief Moore, that you banned the thin blue line flag. And you were saying, you know, it can't be in a division when you walk in, you can't be on a police officer's uniform or a vehicle, but yet you have the LGBTQ flag all over the police vehicle and then a trans flag on the hood of the police car. So I thought it was about uniformity, that only the American flag can be on a police vehicle. So we see your hypocrisy, doesn't make sense to us. Just be a man of your word and stick to your guns. Stop placating and playing these political games. We're never going to forget about the corruption at the highest levels of you, Chief Moore, and Monica Rodriguez, what you did to Captain Smith and Officer Contreras. It was unfair. It's dirty. We're never going to forget it. And we're keeping a close eye on you. And also the 911 to just answer the phone when somebody calls into 911. I don't call very often, but when I called a few weeks ago, 3 minutes for somebody to pick up 911. And these drag queen shows, I think you should look into the child annoyance, which is a penal code of California. We are all mandated reporters. Where is the line? And if you say this is against the law, are you going to enforce the law with these drag queen shows in front of children? Thank you.
And the next speaker is A. Gravener on all items.
Okay, so starting off with the chief's report. The chief's report should be limited to 3 minutes at every meeting. If the chief needs more than 3 minutes, then everyone should be allowed to match his time. Today that was 28 minutes, so everyone should get 28 minutes to give public comment individually today. The chief talked today about how the LAPD cares about the LGBTQIA plus community, but the community is saying that I think it's pretty clear that no one wants cops at Pride, and you know, you sort of touched on it a little bit, but the cops did not keep. The cops sided with the fascists at Santa Elementary. You know, they allowed the fascists to come on to the side of the LGBTQ plus community and the allies. And meanwhile, no one else from our side was allowed to go to their side. Meanwhile, I was there and I had a cop tell me that I tried to space myself out a little bit when one of the fascists was pretty much getting in my face, and the cops weren't allowing me to step back. So like the cops specifically put me in direct danger. Yeah. So let's move on to the consent agenda, where you're approving. Let's see. You're approving. What is it? You're approving a really expensive hotel stays for the chief of police, for Michael Moore. Where's the chief staying on these trips? I mean, like, these are like hundreds of dollars for like 2-night stays. The chief stay at the Four Seasons or something. It seems like the chief is spending a lot of money on these hotel stays. Yeah, let's move on to the agenda items. There's a presentation for the Air Support Division. The helicopters are terrorizing the communities, flying over, creating all kinds of noise pollution, harassing people, and not even providing any kind of benefit. So fuck the helicopters. And for the street takeovers, why don't you give any comment about the LAPD continuously taking over the streets by closing it down for all their ridiculous, bogus investigations? So fuck the police.
Next, we have Philip Tabby.
Mr. Reedy, I would ask that you stay on the right-hand side of the room, please.
Could I have 6 minutes, please?
Okay, then my right or your left? So I have to stay on this side of the room now? That is correct. Mr. Reedy, please. Mr. Reedy, as the presiding officer here, I've stated the rule. I'm asking you, Mr. Reedy, nicely. You can pace on my right-hand side of the room. I can pace. That's what you're doing. Mr. Tabby, please go ahead.
I stand with the parents that are against showcasing an agenda that deals with someone's sexuality, just like they don't want to see it in the schools. The same applies with our law enforcement. Chief S'more's parading around Los Angeles with the religious flag on Sunday was not becoming of a person that's said to be leading the police department. With current California Assembly bills, more and growing concern for parental rights, the LAPD is just promoting division among the people. Many Christians refer to what we've seen on Sunday with you, Chief Moore, as blasphemy. Commission, I have a question. Where does our LAPD draw the thin blue line? Because it seems like it's no longer a straight line. It's a line that you will alter to fit a particular agenda. It's become a line that's consistently moved and even banned in some places. It's no longer thin because it's being painted now with a big brush, glossing over what really matters. I can tell you what I expect instead. I expect that thin blue line to be set in place and to be respected. I expect the leadership to watch over the line so corruption can never touch it. Unfortunately, our leadership has kicked that line out of the way. Please check on the public written comment for last week's Public Police Commission meeting. You cannot continue to ignore the illegal mandate the city of Los Angeles is continuing. The city sure looks like they're guilty of fraud, a crime. How are you handling that case, Chief Moore? You are getting rid of great people here in LAPD and replacing them with subpar recruits coming from the academy. I heard there was movement in training division, some movement with management. I must ask why. We already know the Chief Moore likes to cover things up. I bet there's much more to this story. Standards are lowering in this department in the name of reform. You boast about low crime numbers for this time of the year, but you fail to mention the record rainfall. Rain is equal to less crime. Let's not forget you brought in Boss Lady Rhodes to a commission meeting. After the scandal broke, you commended her in front of
Mr.
everybody.
Tabby, hold on, please. Mr. Reedy, I'm going to give you one warning. Stop disrupting this meeting, or I'm going to ask you to leave. Mr. Reedy, one last time. Stop disrupting this meeting, or you're going to be asked to leave.
How is he disrupting the meeting? He was just.
I'm not answering your question, sir.
He was asking for a business card. That's not disrupting this meeting. He's the presiding officer. He was just asking for a business card. He wasn't disrupting this meeting. If you want to see disruption, I'll show you.
Okay, sir, in the shirt, don't yell again. Otherwise, we'll ask you to leave.
Listen, I've been coming to this meeting since you were here. I've been arrested here 3 times. You don't honestly think that by giving me a
Sir,
warning, that's going to make any real difference?
I'm going to ask the Sergeant of Arms to escort this gentleman out of the meeting.
God forbid. I'm not leaving.
Sergeant of Arms, please escort this gentleman out of the meeting.
I'm not leaving.
He is disrupting the meeting.
They know my name.
Please leave, sir.
No!
Please escort him from the meeting.
Sir, you've been asked to leave. I've been kicked out of better places. And I'll be back. You will be back. We'll all be back. Keep on coming back till the presiding officer. I'm not going anywhere. Don't worry about it.
Mr. Tabby, please proceed.
No one has taken the blame with Chief Boss Lady Rhodes, because Chief knew nothing about the release of the information. Guess what, Jack? You're accountable for this. I'm holding you accountable. We, the people, are holding you accountable. But it seems like nobody's held accountable in this department if you walk a crooked line. Mr. Mark Smith, I'm formally requesting the investigation to be sent to me about the complaint I made about moving Captain Smith and Chief Moore's involvement. I don't understand how many were not interviewed in this investigation, including Smith. We need leadership in this department that will boost morale and increase the hiring numbers with qualified people that only bleed blue. Fire Chief Moore, God bless our LAPD, and please be tougher in these meetings. They're taking up our.
The next speaker is Jonathan Foster. And the chief's report, public comment, and 5A.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. So, what do you got? The TLOs and the IODs and the ACR reports, and I came up with the OOPMs, which is the out of policy murders. You're the same sham. Doesn't matter who appoints you. So let's go over this again.
Has to be that there is also accountability.
Which there isn't.
Face the fucking wall! Face the fucking wall! You sure fucking
Ever be pictured with a drink in your hand and never swear, but this is a big fucking day. But this is a big fucking day. But this is a big fucking day. But this is a big fucking day.
Steve, you might wonder where they get the F word from, Steve. So I want to say this, though. There were now 4 weeks of no OIS, and I think that is progress, even though it's not fast enough. The next one, I want to play this one.
Commissioner Briggs, I like allowing everyone that comes in and submits a comment card to be able to speak. If they've come out this way, they should have an opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Commissioner Clancy. It'll be taken up in the executive.
It'll be taken up in the executive committee. As I said last time, you haven't taken care of that. We went through a whole nother week. And I'm the one that looked at what happened from docket item after docket item after docket item, and I found out it was only 32 minutes. And so we have more time now, but we're not able to speak on each item, which is corrupt. You're corrupt. Your hair's long on one side. It's the right side, which is your left side. It's too long. You don't know how to shave. You can't cite a law. Here's another one.
You talk a little bit about self-hating Jews and anti-Semitism from people who are Jewish.
Racist!
Partially Jewish. I mean, either you are or you aren't. Okay, it's not like I choose. I'm not talking about religious. I'm talking about your heritage.
You're racist!
And
Whether they're Jewish, whether they're a Jew by choice, whether they're quarter Jewish or not at all.
You know, this makes me Choctaw. I'm Choctaw. You people stole my land. You shot us and killed us. I'm Choctaw. If that's Jewish, I'm Choctaw. And God will damn you racists! Haters of Jesus. Lou, is it Louise or is it Lou for loser? That's what I think. It's Maria Loser Calanche. It's probably for Louise. Probably a family honoring. This just makes me so angry. I'm trying not to say the swear word because personally I don't like it. It's reprovement in a word that I really don't appreciate. But here you guys at the Staples Center, SoFi, and had his park use the F word all the time. And he has something to say about somebody else's F word using. And yet the police department are using this all day long.
Next, we have T.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
All of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
It's a lot to unpack as always. I want to say power and strength to the family that first spoke about their son, Felipe, y'all killed. He was having a mental health episode. Power and strength to that family and all the families y'all have killed, all the loved ones lost. You know, Felipe's story reminds me of Grishario Mack that y'all murdered in the Crenshaw Mall. And that was found out of policy. They executed that brother, actually, and found out of policy, still no accountability. The family of Felipe, no answers for a whole year. Also reminds me of the story Waukesha Wilson. They said, you know, no answers for a year. They didn't know what was happening for days. Waukesha Wilson was killed in custody. And poor Miss Hines, 4 days, you know, they had her calling all different departments, only to even showing up for her court arraignment, only to find out Waukesha was killed in custody, and there's still 22 minutes of the video missing. Also, on to Keenan Anderson, y'all falsified his death certificate. The cause of death deferred when we know it was the taser, just to avoid any accountability there. The PR campaign that went terribly wrong. Let's talk about the fireworks that killed Ozzie Hutchinson and Ramon Reyes, but y'all want to talk about fireworks and illegal fireworks, but no mention of the entire neighborhood y'all blew up and displaced and the 2 people that died as a result of that. Where's the accountability, right? And those folks are still displaced. You know, y'all sit here week after week. It's just sickening. More training, more money. You got all the resources, 3.4 billion plus another 87 million. We still have a homeless crisis, a mental health crisis. No amount of training or money can fix this evil, right? And it's interesting how you also, you know, mention the 4th of July and all this other stuff, but no mention of Juneteenth. Y'all really don't care about Black people. And then you threw one of our elders out, but you don't throw or cut off these crazy racist people, that talk all bad about black and brown folks, make racist comments week after week. You never cut them off. You never throw them out, but you just threw two of our folks out. Week after week, month after month, it's the same just evil agenda, y'all. And you don't want to accept any accountability for our folks that you are killing out here on a regular basis. It's really sickening. It's a disgrace. Y'all need to resign. This board is a total sham. I'm disgusted.
The next speaker is Hamid Khan.
So as violence workers who have a license to kill, murder is in policy. That's exactly what we are seeing. We saw the family of Felipe Guerrero, reminded me of families of Akeisha Wilson and Eric Rivera, where, just not informing the families is business as usual as well. So, we're going to continue on, but obviously we're not going to let them become a statistic because these are our community members and these are real people whose families have been hurting and traumatized. And I think that's what brings me to the other point about the constant expansion of these tools of harm and the constant expansion and the weaponry that is given to these violence workers, as they have been called by others. So let's talk about the Air Support Division, which is on the agenda today, and it's going to be a verbal report. And I think when we talk about the Air Support Division, we have to look at it in its wholesome, along with drones and various other things, where the LAPD literally has its own Air Force. And it's interesting that it's called the Air Support Division. Supporting what? And it is supporting the ground troops. It is supporting the violence that is happening on the ground. It is supporting the grenade launchers, the tanks, the automatic weapons, on and on and on. So that's exactly how we should be looking at it, and they're called as force multipliers. Force multipliers for what? Very classic counterinsurgency type language and counterinsurgency type operations. So that's what it's really all about. Where now when you add robot dogs and all the other dogs, this is exactly what's going on, mapping the terrain. I mean, we have to look at their language and unpack all of that too. Mapping the terrain for what? What are they going to be doing? Identifying people. All of this in service to constantly collecting data. And I'm reminded of one of their consultants, Craig Uchida, during Operation Laser, which this man called an experiment when this was dismantled under community pressure. And he says that this is all about collection of data. And Craig Uchida explained that he sought to increase police patrol in laser zones, with police stopping people and collecting their data using field interview cards, because even if the info, and I quote him saying, even if the info didn't lead to anything, it was data that went into the system, and that's what I wanted. This is coming directly from Craig Uchida, who's a consultant. So this whole bullshit about FI cards, this whole bullshit about stop and frisk, this whole bullshit about mapping the terrain, it is all about just mapping it and just kind of just painting it red and painting it red, like these radar scopes are. So that's what it is. That's what business as usual. That's what murder in policy. And that's what we're going to continue to see, because today's report about Felipe Guerrero is, again, a sack of shit. It's just another memo that the Inspector General puts out, that these reports put out. There's nothing about impact, there's nothing about trauma, and that's exactly what we should do.
Next, we have Betty Lay.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
Chief's report, agenda items, and public comment.
Okay, 3 minutes.
First off, thank you very much, Chief Moore, for your report. I appreciate that and support it. And agenda items, I support 3A, 3B, and I totally support the presentation you're going to hear on 4A for air support. They are a critical resource tool, and I'm glad we have them. Also, I want people to comprehend there is but one race on this earth. It's the human race. Oh God, yeah, I hear you. Oh God. Well, people need to understand when there's all these deaths out there, it's black and brown people killing each other. So, with that, everybody stay healthy, stay safe. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, the next speaker is Matios Cadane. On all items.
Yeah, my name is Matias with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. My heart goes out to Mr. Guerrero's family, and it really saddens me to think how frustrating it must be to reconcile what the LAPD does with what they purport to be. You know, with this motto up on the wall, to protect and to serve. And hearing about Mr. Guerrero, I'm reminded of Takar Smith, who LAPD were called to help, but instead they killed him. And even in light of this air support division coming up, I'm reminded of Samuel Soto, who was killed when air support division came and escalated an interaction he was having with LAPD while suffering from a mental health crisis. And so it's impossible to reconcile this entire onslaught of violence with what the LAPD purports to be, unless you understand that the game here is legitimacy, right? It's a veneer of legitimacy. That's the game. There's violence, there's explicit violence, and then there's this body that's meant to make it look legitimate and genuinely helpful, when in reality it's not. And we see that in the language that's being used. When Chief Moore talks about gang reduction and youth development and the betterment of youth by getting jobs, that's antithetical to what we're seeing in reality, right? That's antithetical to people who have jobs, who are productive members of our community being murdered for no reason, right? We don't hear mention of clear examples of the LAPD sexually assaulting children, right? We don't hear the timeline of sexual assault that the LAPD has enacted among children, which you can find at stoplapdspying.org. But what we do hear is Chief Moore bringing up Satakoy Elementary, right? And a lack of an indictment of the anti-LGBTQ plus protesters that were there. Something that would be easy to indict, but he can't do that. No one here can, because you'd be indicting and condemning your own officers. That's who was present. Instead, we hear this language of contrasting protesters, when in reality, what you're equivocating is white supremacists, Proud Boys, with literal parents and their children. It's absurd. It's absurd until you realize that the thin blue line that we saw in action, that we heard Chief Moore reference, is in service to these, transphobes, homophobes, white supremacists. That's who they're all here for. And this body, which doesn't engage with any of this content in a serious way, is really just meant to make this look like it is here to protect people. You can't reconcile these two facts, because the truth is, and I'm going to speak plainly, the LAPD exists to control, target, incarcerate, and brutalize Black, brown, indigenous, poor people, homeless people, people that are othered in some way or another. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Next, we have Steve Rogers.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Condolences to the family that lost a loved one. I don't know the full circumstances, but losing a loved one is always difficult, and condolences to them and acknowledging them. I just want to bring up, firstly, that everyone is entitled to 3 minutes. I should request 5 or 6 minutes, because apparently some people who are there in person don't have respect for the 3-minute rule and limitation. They have the right to dissent. They have the right to dissent using the foulest language and defamation of the police, which occurs on a weekly basis, but they don't have the right to disrupt a meeting. And week after week, we watch disruptions of the meeting. And unfortunately, Commissioner Briggs, the president, does not enforce the rule with an arrest. You have a police commissioner present present there. You have the chief of police, you have the sergeant at arms, and we have continual disruptions week after week. They don't take the rules seriously. And if you want to build trust and establish trust in the LAPD, do it in a public forum where you can actually enforce the law, which everyone sees is being violated. I have repeatedly mentioned what the violation is. It's 410 of the penal code, a misdemeanor. When it's committed in your presence, that's the sergeant at arms and the chief and whatever LAPD personnel you have there, you can effect an arrest. Then there should be a follow-up with a prosecution and a consequence. Because when there are no consequences for crime, no surprise, you get more crime. And what they're doing is a crime. It's unfair to the people who are waiting to speak. There are people week after week who don't get a chance to speak because you only have 45 minutes, and that 45 minutes sometimes is frittered away with disruptions. So Police Commission President Briggs, stand behind the one warning. One warning, then you place them under arrest. Okay, this month, by the way, is Military Appreciation Month. I want to make sure that all the LAPD and law enforcement that have served in the military are appreciated. And know that they're appreciated doing the job that they do, all law enforcement and police, on a day-to-day basis. They are risking their lives for us. They are protecting and serving. They are consistently defamed here, and I expect the chief sometimes to speak up on their behalf. Put the blue line flag back into the stations. The thin blue line stands for law enforcement and those who have sacrificed in the cause of law enforcement. Air Support Division, I completely support their operations in the service of public safety and in the service of officer safety. There are times when patrol cars can't get to the victims fast enough because of traffic or because they're in an unusual place. Air Support Division can make the difference between life and death, and they often do. So thank God for the LAPD. By the way, pride is a sin, and stay safe. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Jason Reedy.
Am I allowed to approach? That shit is funny to you? Make you laugh, Briggs? All right, so speaking on all items, I want to say first, I want to remind the commission that your own agenda says that the board shall take a total of 45 minutes of public comment. But that's not the case under Bitch Boy Briggs. I was able to do a quick audit for last week's public comment period. If you remember last week, Bootlick and Briggs cut off the period despite there being one last person in the room who had to give comment, and he ordered LAPD to physically remove her as she gave her comment from the podium. The total public comment heard last Tuesday was 37 minutes and 25 seconds. Briggs, you said that Gina took up the last speaker's time, but that was a lie. Accounting for all the people who went over last week, that was still only another 1 minute and 58 seconds. Now, here's what this pork chop does. He sets the clock for 45 minutes, and you look at it like you're in detention, instead of allowing for 45 minutes of actual, real public comment. Willie, in order to reach 45 minutes, you have to take 45 minutes of comment from people. You understand that? Now, 3B, Chief Moore wants to visit the New Jersey State Police Real-Time Crime Center, correct? That's what you want to visit, right? The same New Jersey State Police embroiled in a huge scandal at the moment. Their department has been called a big frat house. I'm wondering if Musty Mike is going there to learn or to teach. Now, a quick look shows that the department bypassed 2 gay troopers for a promotion because their supervisor said they weren't interested in creating a LGBT unit. You have Christian Dyer, who was promoted to commanding officer of special operations, likely who you'll be interacting with, who beat up a young girl, partially collapsing her lung. Souther, since you like abbreviations, there was even a captain there who referred to a black officer as the HNIC. Do you want to take a guess at what the N stands for? What about the detective whose body was adorned, or is adorned, should I say, with Nazi imagery and only became a matter of investigation when the public found photos of his torso online? This all sounds like your own beloved LAPD. Now, more. Does the exchange of information include you tricking them or tricking the public into believing that you have this diverse police force? New Jersey State Police are 84% white, but after your visit there, you'll likely make sure that they qualify as Hispanic, right? Talking about their ancestors from Italy and Spain, so you have that diverse force. Now, finally, this closed session item of the murder of Felipe Guerrero. Watching the body-worn video, Jeffrey Kievet, fuck you.
someone who used to be one of your top bike cops and who is an LAPPL delegate could have easily hopped back in his vehicle that day and waited for backup, which was seconds away. But instead, he decided to roll up on somebody who was experiencing a mental health crisis and wasn't threatening anyone and yelled, "Hey, stay right there," and then proceeded to steal his life. It's fucking bullshit. He could have easily gone back in his vehicle, yes or no? Could he have? Could he have? Anyways, fuck this commission. Briggs, what's up with this fucking bullshit? I can't stand on the right side of the room. Where's that rule? I'd like to see that rule cited somewhere.
Thank you, Mr. Reedy.
I'd like to see it cited somewhere.
Madam Secretary, please go to the next speaker.
Next, we have MJ King.
And your officer still hasn't identified himself. You gonna say anything about that?
Good morning. All items and general public comment, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I'd first like to thank you for the warm welcome that I received at my first in-person commission meeting last week. President Briggs, when you announced the end of public comment without everyone giving their public comment, I assumed it was a simple oversight that one person was skipped, so I approached the podium to clarify that potential oversight. When only a few register in this limited opportunity to participate, I was met with unreasonable and excessive force. Commissioner Briggs, you suggested that I wasn't granted time to give public comment because another citizen spoke for too long. And you insinuated I was there with a group simply because I said hello to a well-known former mayoral candidate in the room. This is emblematic of the stereotyping and profiling that often gets this department in trouble. If you're willing to tolerate excessive force in an open meeting in this controlled environment while citizens are exercising their right to participate, how can we expect this council to be interested in excessive force in daily cases that occur across the city? Soboroff, T-Fank, Chief Moore enjoyed it. Commissioner Shields, take a look at you and your body language from the recording of the meeting. You cast your eyes down and you put your head in your hand. Why? You couldn't watch excessive force being used unnecessarily? How does escalation and excessive force instill trust in policing in our community? In a city of 4 million people, you barely have tens of people calling in. You had 7 people in the room to give public comment at the meeting. Commissioner Kalancha, you weren't present for public comment, but you previously expressed in meetings that everyone who submits a comment card should be given the opportunity to speak. I'd love your opinion on this matter. Wait, where's Kalancha? Did she skip public comment again? If I were a commissioner and 7 people came to give public comment, I'd say let them speak. If I were the chief of police, I'd say let them speak. What you did is a glaring reminder that your department chooses violence first. For what? Giving public comment at the podium? It's silly, Commissioner Briggs, that you squabbled over 3 minutes when all I needed was a minute and a half. Public comment is not a waste of time when you serve as the citizen's voice in police affairs. Why are you silencing citizens that take the time to show up? Taking public comment is literally the bare minimum. Y'all need to change the time and locations of these meetings. You're counting on residents not being able to walk between the city council, board of supervisors, and this meeting all at the same time. Not to mention that this environment is extremely hostile. What civilian who has a complaint against LAPD could walk into that building or room? Lastly, Chief Moore, meeting after meeting, you claim you need more mental health responders, but conveniently your budget increases. And where's the budget for mental health responders? You had a broken family stand before you today whose loved one needed care. His death was preventable. Why don't your officers wait for mental health providers before escalating the scene? This is unnecessary, excessive force.
The next speaker is Megan.
And this next speaker will be the last speaker. Thank you.
If I don't go, can somebody else who's here in person go?
If you want to waive your time, yes.
Does it go to somebody who's here in person?
If you want to waive your time, yes. Call the next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Donald Harlan.
Hi, I'm Donald Harlan. Hi, Police Commission. I just wanted to bring up a couple things. I noticed agenda item 3A, 3B, and a general comment. Okay, I was concerned about the governing bodies that the LAPD is servants for. I know that there needs to be some kind of administration, but I'm a little concerned about you guys recruiting people from Boston. You know, people come here from Boston and just ruin the city, try and sell things that don't belong to them, and ruin electoral process. The people that LAPD has invited from Boston have repeatedly, when they get here, destroy our elections and try and sell things that don't belong to them, develop real estate that don't belong to them directly out of the LAPD's recruitments in these other states. You know, I understand that you guys do need to go to Boston, Massachusetts for your governing body, but I would request that you guys not bring anybody back from there. And also, I see you're visiting New Jersey and New York. You know, recruit people from New Jersey or New York for Los Angeles? No, that's a terrible idea. Find out what they're doing over there, and investigate them and get to know them. That's a good idea. Also, I wanted to report to the police commission that this imposter mayor Karen Bass is recruiting rapists, kidnappers, and grifters into LAPD. I don't believe that this mayor, whoever that is, that she should be hiring anybody into LAPD. Her recommendations for civilian hires should just be wiped out. That a lot of people are really concerned about that. You might want to wait to see how much certification and power that mayor really has before you guys just let her guys in the LAPD. Also, I was curious, what's the brand name of the hotel that the LAPD is going to be using when they're going on their trips? Also, yeah, I'm just concerned about the civilian hires, especially from the mayor. You know, I know she needs somebody personally to watch her, but I don't want her bringing a bunch of people or them bringing a bunch of people, however you see it. And that is a big problem, that people come from other states, they're invited here through LAPD or recruited from LAPD. I know you guys need people, and there's always a lot of guys out there looking for jobs, going to the big city, but also consider, this is my city. I have a lot of electoral votes around the country. If you guys just recruit anybody over here to Los Angeles, you could be inviting more problems than you would ever understand. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to go to the consent agenda items. Mr. Sherwin, public comment period has ended.
Commissioner President Briggs, if there's a member of the audience that has a complaint or concern about your safety, I encourage you to talk to the lieutenant that's right to your, okay, thank you. We'll address it through that investigation.
Thank you, Chief Moore. At this time, are there any items on the consent agenda items that the commissioners want to hold back? Seeing none, I move that we adopt items 3A and B. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. At this time, we're going to the regular agenda items. Item 4A. Mr. Sherwin, at this point, you're disrupting the meeting. I will ask that you stop disrupting the meeting, or I'll ask that you be removed. I will ask that the Sergeant of Arms remove Mr. Sherwin, please.
You threatened to throw me out last week and you didn't do it, but you did have 4 people escort the commenter. The one person left, you had to escort her out of the room bodily. You're a bully, Briggs, and a coward. You know who doesn't say that they're the presiding officer?
I will ask that the Sergeant of Arms remove Mr. Sherwin, please. Mr. Sherwin, you are disrupting the meeting. Mr. Sherwin, please leave the meeting. Mr. Khan, I'm going to ask that you stop disrupting the meeting, or I'll ask that you leave. Mr. Khan, please stop disrupting the meeting. Sergeant of Arms, please remove Mr. Khan, please.
Well, you can remove all of us, but this is not going to stop. This is bullshit. People are constantly coming. People have taken time from their work. People have left their families.
You have 45 minutes, Mr. Khan. You're told this every single meeting. You understand this.
Fucking 5 minutes.
Sergeant of Arms, please remove Mr. Khan from the meeting.
Who took 5 minutes? Who took 5 minutes? People are just, everybody has been sitting over here just waiting for that to happen. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. People are taking time. People have just left their families. Everybody's here. Everybody's taking their time to speak. People have something to say, and you don't want to hear. There's a family out there, somebody who's traumatized, somebody who's been hurt. I mean, this is public comment, so we can't even fucking just say anything. I'm leaving. I'll leave it. This is fucking ridiculous.
Sir, please sit down. Thank you.
It would be 15 minutes.
Mr. Cadane, you've had an opportunity to speak already. I'm going to ask that you stop disrupting the meeting. Mr. Cadane, please stop disrupting the meeting or I'll ask that you be removed. Sergeant of Arms, please remove Mr. Cadane from the meeting. Sergeant of Arms, please remove Mr. Cadane from the meeting. Ma'am, I'm going to ask that you stop speaking at this time. You're disrupting the meeting.
42 USC 1983. Fuck you.
Thank you, Captain.
So why are y'all so scared to hear public comment? And I know that Briggs is tied in there. You're supposed to be an oversight body. You are not.
Ms. Abdullah, you've been here on, Dr. Abdullah, you've been here on a number of times. You understand the rules here, and it's 45 minutes. You weren't here in time to put your cart in forward.
You don't work for him. He works for you. So I'm talking to Southers and Shields who are relatively new.
No one is going to answer your question, is it? Dr. Abdullah, you're disrupting this meeting at this point. I will ask that you leave. Ma'am, I will ask that you leave. I will ask that the Sergeant of Arms remove Dr. Abdullah, please.
And instead, you all are acting like you work for the police. Be an oversight body. Be the oversight body that you're supposed to be. Southers and Shields, you say you want accountability. You say that's what you stand for. Say something. Say something and do something. I'm sorry, what did you just say? Time for you to leave. You actually don't need to be arrested. So I'm gonna leave because I didn't budget time to be arrested.
Ma'am, I've asked that you be quiet, please. Thank you. Good morning, Captain Parker. Can you please proceed? Mr. Reedy, please leave.
Now, am I being thrown out, or are you just telling me to leave?
I'm asking you to leave. You're disrupting the meeting.
But am I disrupting, so you're saying
I'm saying that you're disrupting the meeting, Mr. Reedy. Mr. Reedy, if you continue, I will ask that the Sergeant of Arms escort you from the meeting.
Oh, okay. Fucking bullshit. Your officer still didn't identify himself. Where's his identification? I'll leave once I get his identification. Who's your sergeant at arms? He should be able to give me
Mr. Reedy, please leave the meeting. You're, at this point, disrupting the meeting.
You can't even follow these basic rules, which is what an officer is supposed to identify themselves. Their name and their serial number.
Sergeant of Arms, please escort Mr. Reedy from the room.
So when do I get their information? When? When? Why is that so hard? I can't get his name and serial number? And you guys claim that you're not a secret police force? Get the fuck out of here. So fucking sad.
Sergeant Parker, let's try this a third time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to kind of go over what Air Support does. Our primary objective of Air Support Division is to provide aviation support to Los Angeles Police Department and all its operations. Our motto is, the mission is the same, only the vehicle has changed. We consider ourselves first and foremost police officers, and the helicopter is a police vehicle that flies in the air, and we respond to radio calls, officer requests. We help with during fire season. We help with homeless. We help find missing children. So we do everything the black and white police vehicle on the ground does. We just do it from the air, and we help anywhere we can. So it's to provide air support and specialized units to Los Angeles Police Department. We are here to enhance officer and public safety, reduce the incident of crime, and reduce the fear of crime as well. And to accomplish this mission, we will provide a rapid response, tactical insight, and airborne assessment of incidents in a safe and professional manner. This is one of the first helicopters that 1957 that was really the introduction of air support. It was the old Hiller. It was a piston-driven engine, as you can see there. Then we moved on to the Bell 47. You can see this aircraft versus the ones that we have currently, and just the evolution of aviation, certainly way back then to right now. That's pretty fascinating. So Air Support Division, 1956, originally was a traffic enforcement, one helicopter and 4 traffic officers. Then as we moved through the years, 63, 65, we added additional helicopters. And then in 1969, renamed helicopter section, adding additional helicopters, so a total of 6. And then in the 72 and 74, it was permanently assigned observers. And then it was renamed to what is currently called now as Air Support Division. That's the breakdown of the personnel assigned to the division. 1 captain, 3 lieutenants, sergeants, TFOs. TFOs are tactical flight officers. They sit on the left side of the aircraft, and they handle all the command and control, the communications, the navigation, the radios, the police radios, the FLIR camera system. They do a lot of heavy lifting. Very talented people are TFOs. We have 31 pilots. We have 5 tower operators. Our tower operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They handle and coordinate all the movement on the flight deck. We have 3 reserve officers, 1 adjutant, 1 admin clerk, a security guard, and 3 garage attendants. This kind of gives a comparison of 2 other major cities on population, square miles, and their police force: New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. And here's just a map of Los Angeles and what we are responsible as air support in patrolling, roughly 460 square miles, all the way down from the San Pedro north up to Sylmar, and then to the west, Santa Monica, Pacific Palisades, and then to the east of Hollenbeck. Quite a large amount of real estate to be covered. So air support is broken down into 4 primary sections. Astro is air support to regular operations. That is really what we call our bread and butter. Those are our patrol units. We have special flights. Special flights does special things. They do surveillance, but they also assist with downlinks as well and help incident commanders during special events. We have support where my chief pilot, my chief officer, and my safety officer, they are dedicated positions. Any pilot or any person interested in air support or gets transferred to air support, we will train them from ground school all the way to a commercial rating as a command pilot. And my support section has manages and oversees that. They have the instructor pilots. They have also the training for the tactical flight officers. And also maintenance. Maintenance is a big, maintenance is a significant piece of aviation, any aviation unit. There's a lot of rules and regulations that the manufacturer provides. And maintenance is, we follow maintenance strictly. There's no cutting corners when it comes to timed out maintenance issues. And then administrative, always have an administrative unit to handle projects that we may receive. Here's a quick recap of some of our productivity and our hours flown in the last 3 years. Number 2 is total responses there. Just about 100,000 incidents that air support responded to during those 3 years. First at scene on quite a bit. And guns recovered in the past 3 years, 300, 600, and 470 guns, along with the total responses. Special flights, talked about special flights. We have a medium lift helicopter, and that helps us in times where there might be a disruption in our transportation facilities. We can bring people and supplies. We can also bring specialized personnel to an event, either through a fast rope or to an intersection where perhaps the roads are shut down. We can move our metropolitan resources there, our canines, their handlers, as well as all the related equipment. Very versatile, very effective helicopter. We have one of those. We also have the King Air. The King Air is used for long-distance transportation. If we have to do extraditions, we have to have detectives respond to an out-of-state prison facility to interview. We can also move evidence very quickly, such as DNA, if time is of the essence. Went over the support section. Here's got just a quick snapshot. 16 Airbus helicopters. They're B2s and B3s. B3 is just a new model of the B2, and then we have the one medium lift and the one King Air. And this is our fleet status. Our goal is to replace aging aircraft. The older aircraft gets, the more obsolete the equipment on the aircraft becomes, and the manufacturer vendors, sometimes it's hard to support some of those systems. And so about 15,000 hours in 10 years, I start looking at finding new aircraft. This is a picture of aircraft in completion in Grand Prairie, Texas, and Mississippi, one of those 3 locations. And that's completed with all the paint schemes, the lettering, and the equipment. Inside the cockpit, it's improved over the years with what we call a glass cockpit, touch screens for navigation, for flight limitations. We monitor engines, engine pressures, temperatures, speed, altitude, etc., rotor speeds. Has a caution warning panel. If one of those lights goes off, there's specific directions that the pilot must take. And then the radios. We have aviation radios and the police radios. Concept of operations, one pilot, one tactical flight officer, minimum 5 years of service with the LAPD. We want those that are familiar with the organization, its mission, its policies, and its procedures. We fly 24 hours, we fly every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. 2 aircraft, they begin first launch, 2 aircraft at 8:30 in the morning, and we land at 04:30, and then we're back up again at 8:30. We have, during those hours that we're down, we do have crews that remain just in case there's a call out. That's your standby. We monitor our citywide tactical frequencies and respond to the hotshots throughout the city, and we cover and are responsible for all the 21 geographical areas. We can respond to self-deploy to calls. If we hear a hot shot and it's something that we can get to, we will respond to it. Officer requests, conduct extra patrol, and of course, radio calls that the RTO will assign us. 507 feet, 500, 700 feet is our patrol altitudes. That varies depending on if we're in someone else's airspace. TFO responsibilities, pilot, don't hit anything. Perimeters and pursuits, we are frequently and definitely pursuits are part of our policy that we are there involved in the pursuit package. Notable events, the airship searches for missing children, victims in the wash during heavy rains, helping to clear the hillside using our FLUR during the fire season and assist the Port of Los Angeles with its critical infrastructure security. Los Angeles is, we have the financial district, entertainment district, we have several venues for sporting events. We also we had the Super Bowl as well. These are some of the things that are outside our general course of action that we assist with. Some of the notable events are special flights. Back in last year, 2022, 1.7 million pills and 309 pounds of the deadly fentanyl, 600 guns, and the arrest of 20 murder and 15 robbery suspects for special flights alone. We provide overhead reconnaissance and tracking of high-risk suspects, which of note was an emergency call-out of a kidnapped 14-year-old girl threatened to be killed. The girl was rescued, suspects in custody. We also were heavily involved in the follow home robberies and the home invasion task force, multiple incidents and suspects that was covered by the news frequently, and the robbery, carjacking, kidnappings, and sexual assaults of female victims. During a warrant service, one of the this is an Astro incident. During a warrant service, the crew observed a suspect attempt to hide evidence by throwing a shotgun into the adjacent yard. The helicopter saw the gun being thrown, but no officers observed it. So, that vantage from above assists. This is just one example of many where the crew directs officers to the gun, which was safely recovered. In another incident, the airship responded to a shooting, and while overhead, located the suspect and the gun, and the officers took the suspect in custody without a use of force. These are just several examples of what we do on a regular basis as we respond to those 100,000 calls in those last 3 years. GPS moving map, that's just an overlay like in your car where we also have for aviation, kind of helps with navigation. Our night sun, our FLUR camera system.
What is that?
The FLUR camera system?
Yeah.
So it has multiple features. Primarily, it will take an image that it picks up on the ground, and they can send it to the incident commander for kind of a different perspective from 500 feet above. It also does the FLIR. It will pick up the heat signatures.
Oh, okay.
So at night, if there's a suspect hiding underneath the car in the bushes, we can direct officers and at least help minimize any harm or any de-escalation and not escalating use of force. This will be an example of it. I won't bore you too much with the video. This, what you see is without the FLIR. This is the night sun. And then we're going to switch to the FLIR, and you will see the heat signatures. Same image, but without the night sun on. The vehicles, the lights, looks like a exhaust pipe or like maybe a gas for the water heater on the roof that's warm. So those are the images that the TFO can see and communicate that information down to the officers on the ground. Another example. This is important because sometimes we'll find suspects inside containers that we don't see at night, and this way we can let the officers know. They can set up tactically. No one's surprised. There's no have to real quick decisions where mistakes can be made. At least they have a good understanding of what's out there and they can respond accordingly. That's our heliport. That's where we launch out a significant part of our operations. We also have maintenance in Van Nuys. The maintenance crew turns all the wrenches and keeps us in the air. That's all I have, and I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Captain Parker. So my question before I turn it over to Commissioner Soberoff, who's fighting at the bit here, is can you give me an example of how the air support ship actually responds to a call before a patrol unit does? And give us
Sure,
an
of course.
example, please.
So in the aircraft, we have not only the aviation radios, but we also have the police radios. And each time we are flying over the city, we listen to the citywide frequency, which picks up all the hotshot calls. But the TFO is also responsible for the division we're flying over. So any call that comes out of that specific division we'll also hear. So if there is a request regarding domestic violence or a shooting, we will hear it on the radio, and we might be overhead, or it might only take us 15 or 30 seconds to get there because we fly a straight route without having to, navigate through traffic. And quite frequently, we're there on scene, and quite often we can interrupt or change the mind of the suspect because the police are overhead.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Soberoff.
No question. No.
Thank you. Commissioner Southers.
No, wait, just give me 1 second.
Thank you, President Briggs.
Did you have one? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just kidding. Because of the terrain in Los Angeles, which is not unique in America, but in most big cities are very flat, and the importance of the helicopter unit in arriving on the scene before the officers can possibly get there, and sometimes aiding their access, is important. What percentage of the time do you get there before the ground units?
I'd have to go back to those numbers, but
About. It's significant, isn't it?
it is. If I like.
In 6,668 instances, they're first on scene. Now, the department responds to just under 1 million calls for service, but these are, they're first on scene. They're typically going to respond to the urgent or emergency calls. They do not typically respond to routine calls. Urgent and emergency calls are, again, about 150 to 200,000 would be my off top of the head estimate. So it's a small percentage of time, but it's critical is that, as the captain indicated, that they're arriving within seconds. Our average response time for a ground unit for an emergency call for service in Los Angeles is 7 minutes. What air support can do in 7 minutes in traveling an expansive area is tens of miles.
That's true. There are response times. There are times where we're there within seconds of the call. When the call comes out, we can certainly, if it's across the city, we can cover a lot of real estate in 7 minutes.
I've read and seen, because I've been up there with you guys, people interfering with our helicopters through lasers,
Yes.
through shooting at
Yes.
them. Do we have an apprehension rate and severe penalties for that? That's about as dangerous as it gets.
So we have seen instances, our laser strikes have increased. But we do have tools that the crew members on their helmets, they have a laser shield.
Good.
And we're seeing the frequency rise with the street takeovers, because we'll help with instant commanders in trying to coordinate and control and these street takeovers. And so the crew members know, the pilots, the TFOs, as they're approaching the scene, to drop down that shield. There are times where they're flying and without warning, they will get hit with the laser. And we do have a test that is taken. We'll have the crew land, and they'll do an evaluation of their eyes. And if they pass the test, we put them back up in the aircraft. If they have any problems, we have them seek medical treatment. We certainly won't have them fly until they're back to 100%.
Last question. Equipment that we don't have for safety, equipment that's on our list. I mean, I've witnessed that over 10 years, and most of it is, or the things that I've heard of, have been taken care of. Are there some serious issues that are unfunded for the safety of the officers and the public in relation to our overall?
So we have a very comprehensive safety program at LAPD Air Support. In the last, since 2016, we've flown 115,000 hours without an incident. I have a dedicated safety officer that has a safety certificate from USC. We have check rides from check airmen, our instructor pilots, every 90 days for our pilots. It's our full down auto procedures, whether it's we shut the engines off and we do an auto rotation fully to the ground. We do hydraulics as well. There's a few, and stuck pedals, there's a few emergency procedures that we cannot replicate in the aircraft, like a fire. But we have recently been able to, I've been sending my pilots to flight safety in Colorado, where we can simulate all emergencies that occur in flight, because there's nothing better than a well-trained pilot who can make quick and accurate decisions at 500, 800 feet over a congested city. So there is a focus every day on safety. But to answer your question, we are looking into a flight simulator that can be on campus in the hangar, where we can have the pilots trained for instrument rating. The instructor pilots my requirements is that they're airline transport pilots, the highest rating the FAA offers. And those are the folks that train our people. Those are the folks that train the pilots every 90 days. But some of the gaps would be instrument training. And a simulator will help with that. And also if, mountainous terrain training. And an engine fire. We just can't, obviously, we can't replicate that in the air. So a few things, but we work very hard to ensure that they are up to date on their training. We exceed the FAA requirements, and that has boded well for us with our safety record.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for what you do.
Very welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Sobroff. Commissioner Suthers.
Thank you, Captain. Just a question. Do you ever get, or are you able to respond to an interagency request for a neighboring city that doesn't have air support?
Yes, we do. There's several cities that are adjacent or next to Los Angeles. You have Santa Monica, you have Culver City, Beverly Hills, and San Fernando, and yes, we will, and then CHP. It is not uncommon for us to help out.
Okay, thank you. The question was because I asked many decades ago when you did come. I didn't know if you still did that. So the question I have for you is, if that, under those circumstances, realizing we've now committed an airship to another jurisdiction, what happens to the coverage for our city?
So we fly the two airships on the shift. If there happens to be another call that necessitates an airship, a request, the secondary airship will respond to that call. If things begin to increase in the call load, and the call in the outside city may involve, certainly a high risk or some of our resources, I can launch another ship.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Suthers. Commissioner Shields.
Yes, just two quick questions, and thank you, Captain, for the great presentation. You indicated, some of the comparisons between New York and Chicago, just in terms of the breadth of the city and the population. Do you have any general understanding of how the LAPD resources, both in terms of personnel and equipment, compare to New York and Chicago or any other big city?
So we did a quick review of how many flight hours these other larger cities fly, and how many incidents that they fly. And if I look at the number of aircraft compared to the incidents, we could actually use another aircraft or two.
Was that a hint? Okay, thank you. So generally that they may have a little bit more resources versus the number of flight and calls that they're responding to.
Yes, our responses to incidents and the number of hours we fly is substantial.
Thank you. And given the kind of important work that the Air Division does and how much it can help both officer safety and community safety, it seems like the public might not always know about the work that you all are doing. And instead they just hear it overhead or complain about noise. Is there any efforts made for either like social media presence or any way of communicating with the public about what the Air Division does, and particularly information when they hear something overhead to actually let them know what it is for?
So we have several avenues to educate and inform the public. One of my goals for this year is to have my supervisors and crew members attend the CPAB meetings for each bureau and each of the divisions to kind of talk about, and this PowerPoint is part of that presentation, just to field questions and to answer any concerns that they might have. Most of the questions are, tell me about the helicopter, how fast does it go, what did you do? But also they have some relevant questions about our purpose and our mission. So that's one of the goals. We also invite these same community policing groups or similar to the heliport to take a tour and take a look at our operation and how comprehensive our operation is. It's also important for me to ensure that my tower operator, as well as my watch commanders, when they receive that call from the citizen, because most of the time, 9.5 out of 10 times, it's they're concerned about why is the helicopter overhead, and when we can share with them it's a perimeter, or it's a robbery suspect or a person with a gun, simply informing them, I think it gives them a little bit of peace of mind, and that's very important to me that we do that, because those calls can be. I mean, I would want to know in my house if there's a helicopter overhead. So those are some of the three major processes that I use and expect to educate and communicate what we do.
Thank you so much. And I would just encourage you to also look at social media, since that is just such a great avenue of information. But I think those are all great steps that you're taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shields. Captain,
Commissioner, if I might, do you have a question, or?
I do have a question.
Okay,
but
before you close, I
Okay.
just want to take that.
Sure. Captain, you have 31 pilots, according to the chart that you showed us, correct?
Yes.
And of those pilots, how many are female?
So I have 10 that are pilots.
Impressive.
I'm sorry, 10 that are crew members, which is either a pilot or a tactical flight officer.
Okay. So that's the 30 of 30 that we're aiming for across the department. That's an impressive number. Chief, please.
Yep, and I just want to compliment, that has been a growth area for air support. It's been an area of focus for the last decade, and it is, I'm proud of their work, their outreach and engagement. It's ongoing and continued. It is also that outreach to the community. It's part of our 30 by 30, but also our outreach and engagement is to showcase the diversity and the fact that our air support, our other specialized units are meant to be reflective of all of our communities. Just a couple of things the captain was nice about in regards to where we're at in regards to the equipment and safety. Safety is job one for air support. That is the overarching paramount issue of concern. Unfortunately, as a department, we have had fatalities, 3, I believe, in regards to the history four, as regards to the history of air support operations. Their valor in their service, but unfortunately, in tragic death is representative of the dangers that these men and women, endure every day. So safety is the overarching concern. That also then plays into the number of hours that we fly. The instrument flight restrictions and the safety envelope has to be secure. I'm proud of their safety record. Currently, we have 7 aircraft that are at or exceeding our recommended, as an internal measure, our recommended replacement cycle. What happens is, though, those aircraft still going to undergo rigorous and ongoing safety inspections to ensure their operations, and they can operate beyond these hours and beyond the airframe numbers as the 1976 twin engine, which I was in a couple months ago, represents, is that the age of the aircraft is not the sole determiner. The maintenance is, maintenance tends to increase in cost into the overall operation. So the timely replacement, I want to thank this commission, Mayor Bass, as well as the city council, which on average is replacing an aircraft, a 1-2 combination, 1 aircraft minimum a year, and on odd years, a 2 aircraft combination. An area that we could see improvements on is the replacement of these 7. It would allow us to do what we did about 7 to 8 years ago when we were flying 3 aircraft. 3 aircraft allows us to respond to more than 6,600 calls. Those are emergency calls, those are urgent calls. Those are matters where officers are perhaps involved in a vehicle pursuit. We want to see an airship over a vehicle pursuit at the earliest opportunity. While majority of air pursuits are under 3 minutes in duration, a pursuit that goes beyond that and has an airship in a tracking mode allows us on the ground tactics to back away, and we see the overall safety. So it's not just the response to a fixed perimeter, which also saves time and saves officers' lives, as well as allows us to quickly identify those persons responsible to do this. Lastly, Captain, as a question, one of the overarching issues that come back from those that are critical of air support is the noise. So can you talk briefly about the efforts by air support to deal with noise pollution and recognizing that it is an impact on a community's sense of calm having an aircraft overhead?
Yes, we fly at a recommended 800 or higher AGL above the ground when we're not working a call. But when we are working a call, we do have to get down lower because we can see better and coordinate. But my crew members, and the expectation is for them, and is that once the call is over, that we resume to normal operating altitudes. Now, there are multiple airports within the city, LAX, Burbank, and Van Nuys, and each airspace is unique, and each airspace is essentially owned by that airport. LAX has altitude restrictions in certain areas, which it has to be 500 feet or below, and I can't fly over that. And there's other areas where it's 900 feet or below. And when we traverse Burbank and Van Nuys also has those same restrictions. And when we traverse the hillside to go from downtown to the valley, the expectation is these flights are 2,000 feet AGL when going over the hilltops, just to help minimize the noise. The helicopters are loud, but we get in, we handle the call, and we clear as quickly as we can.
One last issue. Generally, in regards to traversing the Santa Monica mountain range, can you talk briefly about air travel, general aviation air travel, in regards to the freeways and what the pathways are and how that works, not just for us, we have exemptions, but how it works for all aircraft?
Yeah, so it's the LA Basin is very busy for aircraft travel, not just police with the 2 helicopters that we have, but you have news media, you have tours, you have other first responders that fly. You have Van Nuys. Van Nuys is the largest or the busiest private aircraft ownership in the country, and and the routes that we take are also similar routes that the other aircraft pilots will take, whether it's the 405 freeway, the Cahuenga Pass through Universal Studios, or the 5 freeway. Those are general flight paths for all aircrafts and that we take as well. And then Burbank, of course, has the Southwest Airlines that operates on a regular basis, and then LAX have the heavies that we call them, the large commercial airliners that come in from the east and travel all the way over the 110 freeway and the 405 freeway. But the paths are recognized and established flight paths that not only do we take, but the other pilots will also take.
Thank you. Just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Commissioner Suthers, Commissioner Soboroff, I believe you had one last question.
Sure. I recall that we were given, but unable to spend the money to fix up a fire department helicopter that held more than 4 people. Do we have any in our fleet now that hold over 4? And why do we need, what's the necessity for them? And when are they used?
Yeah, so we have the medium lift, the solid blue helicopter that I showed. That is that can transport more than 4 people. It can transport up to 9 people, depending on weight and what the equipment they have, and it can transport supplies as well. So that was originally the fire department's helicopter several years ago, and we were able to move it over to our inventory. So essentially painted it from red to blue. So that is the helicopter that we use for moving a number of people, equipment, and supplies if needed, and to do the specialized insertions as needed.
Okay.
And if I want to build on that, there's ongoing training each month regarding the deployment of that. This is a twin engine. It takes specialized skills, including the pilots. But what's critical of that is not just the movement of a tactical situation, which the movement of a SWAT team or immediate team, such as a Terminal 3 shooting that occurred with an active shooter in the terminal area, but also in an event of an earthquake, we fully expect that the roadways into the basin will be compromised. And so there's an emergency air traffic plan that allows us to begin transporting initial critical elements of the organization and leadership, and then eventually move down through to the delivery until we can get other aviation resources through mutual aid and through the support of the National Guard. So this is the robustness of that. It is limited because it is a repurposed aircraft that was salvaged by the fire department. So the air hours on that engine, those 2 engines, do limit the number of hours we flight. So it's an area that, again, though, we recognize the cost and the overall burden. And so it's balancing act continually and getting the mission focused to the underlying scope of needs.
Was that the one that they were going to sell us but wound up giving us?
Well, I won't talk about the finances other than to say one city fire department, when they salvaged it off, it went to the CAO and the CAO provided to us. I do believe that there was transfers amongst the city departments for this, but it's all for the same city.
Yeah,
This was just moving it from, again, the fire department's used. They acquired new aircraft, and so their service life of this aircraft had reached their point of diminishing returns, and we found it as an opportunity that, given our limited scope of the hours in which we need to fly that aircraft in order to support the underlying missions, that it hit the sweet spot.
Thank you, Chief. Captain Parker, thank you very much for a great presentation. Stay safe out there.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next, we're going to go to item 4B on the agenda, the department's response to the City Council with respect to street racing and street takeovers. We have Deputy Chief Graham.
Good morning, members of the commission.
Good morning.
And while I realize I'm here to give you an overview of the report that we prepared as a response to the city council motion, I have brought backup with me. So I have with me today Sergeant Randy Sanchez from South Traffic Division. He is the supervisor of our street racing task force in Operation South Grill. I have Sergeant Arnold Castellanos, who is the supervisor in charge of the Central Bureau of the Detective Ryan Moreno, who is the detective in charge of investigations at South Bureau. The efforts of him and his team brought to justice the individual whose reckless spinning on Christmas Day last year ended the life of a 20-year-old Mrs. So the efforts of him and his, now I gotta start over. The efforts of him and his incredible team of investigators can't be understated. So while I'm going to give you the wave top version of the report, if you have any questions in regards to street racing enforcement, how the task forces are working, or the follow-up investigations, my team is here to answer those questions.
Great, thank you.
So to begin, we were asked by the City Council to do three things. We were asked to look at our call load and do an evaluation of streets of critical nature in relation to street racing throughout the city. We were asked to analyze these intersections and locations and to determine if there were any similarities between them where physical altercations or other enforcement tactics could be utilized to deter street racing activity. And then finally, taking a look at measures that have already been put in place here in the city or elsewhere in the country and bring back to the City Council an evaluation. And through this, we were working in concert with the Department of Transportation and the Bureau of Engineering. So as an overview of the call load for street racing, and I'm referencing now the beginning of the report here on page 1, the department handled roughly 19,506 calls in the 3-year period that we did the analysis for, from 2020 to 2022. The caveat to that is that these are calls that specifically have an MO code that's located in our dispatch protocols that indicate street racing activity. As any of the gentlemen that are here sitting with me can tell you, we do receive other calls that are disturbance groups or reckless driving calls that, depending on the date and the time that those calls come out, are very likely also related to street racing. They're just not captured in that mechanic. So that's likely an underreport. Although when you add that in with the experience of our street racing task force team, they had a lot of that input into coming up with the locations that we're going to present to the council. Moving on, it shows you a profile of the activity, where the radio calls come out year over year in relation to street racing. So there has been an evolution over the last 3 years, and I believe that the enforcement efforts and the interdiction efforts in Operations Central Bureau, as you can see the 3-year progression, have lowered the amount of calls overall in that bureau, but also lowered their ratio as it's represented by citywide calls. As I'll get into in a minute, the metropolitan area of Los Angeles has a different street racing culture than the West Side and then the Valley. And I guess there's no time like the present, so I'll just jump into it. The Valley represents calls that come out that are very traditional type of street racing. For those that are familiar with the Valley, very grid design of the streets up there, very wide streets, freeway-sized streets that traverse very long straightaways. And so it really is conducive to the traditional, what people think about when they think about street racing, with dropping the flag and racing for pinks and all that good stuff, with the occasional street takeover thrown into the mix. As you move to West Bureau has a much lighter profile for street racing, but one of the things that's very unique to them is marauding bands of illegal vehicles that come from other areas or other regions of the county, meet up in West Bureau because of some of the iconic backdrops that they can get social media photos on, such as Hollywood or the beach or Avenue of the Stars, and then they will take large groups of 100, 200 ATV vehicles and then go marauding for a period of time through areas in West Bureau. As you get to the page 6 in the report, you'll see the average time of day when these calls come out, and you'll see in West Bureau that the average time of day is in the middle of the afternoon, because that's when this activity is occurring. Then you move into the metropolitan area where these heroes are working every weekend. And now you've got the picture of the street takeovers, where they're blocking streets with hundreds of people. They're doing these very, very dangerous spinning exercises. And it is my honest belief that while there is a lot of speculation about the popularity of it because of movies and whatnot, it's the monetization of the social media. You know, every piece of footage that you look at, whether it's captured by the news or captured by us, these people are not hanging out of the cars whooping and hollering. They're hanging out of the cars with their cell phones, and they're filming live. And the more reckless and the more daring the footage can be, the more likely that they're going to increase their following on social media, and it will increase the payday. And so I think this monetization is part of what we're pushing back against. And it's a conversation that the department has with our elected officials about taking a look at taking leadership on preventing this illegal activity from translating into dollars. So the next couple of pages just shows you the breakdown day of the week. There's really no surprise there. Weekend days are much more prevalent for this activity than the weekdays. Actually, it culminates on Sunday being the highest concentration of calls for every bureau. Moving on, in response to the council's direction, we identified both a citywide list of the most impacted intersections and then broke that further down by the most impacted intersections in the 4 operations bureaus. And again, if you look at that list in some of the streets that will jump out at you, and you think about what is in that area, the Hollywood and Highland area, the Echo Park area, these are areas where that social media piece is going to have that much more because of the Los Angeles identity that can be put into the background of what they're showing. Moving on, again to page 6, it shows you there has been a reduction in both Central Bureau and Valley Bureau, West Bureau and Valley Bureau in their total contribution to the citywide total of these calls. And I think a lot of that has to do with the interdiction activity that's happening because of the street racing task forces in the Valley specifically. And then West Bureau has gotten a very good idea of the rhythm of how to disrupt these large groups of illegal vehicles coming up onto the west side. And again, looking down at the times, for once you understand the culture, it's not a surprise there. You've got afternoon calls as the highest spike in West Bureau. You've got these early evening calls for racing coming out in the Valley, and then you creep into the earlier morning hours when you have these more dangerous organized spinning activities that occur in the metropolitan area of Los Angeles. Continuing on to page 8, we start getting into engineering redesigns and recommendations for the city. So far, the city has engaged in an actual physical redesign of 2 locations that we're aware of. One is Glen Oaks and Polk Street up in the Valley, where they did a hardened median in the intersection. And then the other one was the use of BOTS dots, which are the raised plastic dots on the 6th Street Bridge. Both of them have met with mixed results. In the Glen Oak and Polk Street, if the goal was to get them off of Glen Oaks and Polk Street, it worked. They don't race there, they race 1 block over now, where the physical barriers no longer take effect. In regards to the BOTS dots on the bridge, in my conversations with Operations Central Bureau, who did a wonderful job in dealing with that issue, the dots themselves have been a deterrent, especially for higher end cars. They will cause a very jarring result as you hit that dot, especially if you're sliding. But for those who like to do that activity in stolen cars, or cars where they're not so concerned as to the look of the car, that doesn't deter them at all. And unfortunately, as you'll see later in the report, Compton used the BOTS dots as a deterrent, and in Compton, they simply pried the dots out of the intersections where they were being used, and the street racing activity continued. On the 6th Street Bridge, there have been locations where the dots were removed, but from the skid mark trail, they can tell that it was actually removed by actual crashing into them, as opposed to any actual means to pry them up. So of the 2 of those physical barriers that the city has looked at, the result from the hardened medians, and that's basically large hardened plastic or hardened rubber that they raise up in the middle of the intersections to prevent that unfettered sliding across the lanes of traffic. And that seems to have deterred that kind of activity, at least there in Glen Oaks. And then in other municipalities that we looked at where they've used varying tactics, that seems to be the tactic that works for curbing the activity when you talk about just a physical solution. So what follows is based on both call load and the actual locations of arrest, locations of activities, and the history of the interdiction activity by the various street racing task forces is our best recommendations to the city about intersections that are most affected by the street racing, by this phenomena. So we go into it based on each one of the traffic bureaus, each one of these intersections. And again, no surprising, taking a look at these intersections, they're either, like if you look in the valley, the Cessnon and Reseda, Balboa and San Fernando Mission, big, wide intersections where it allows for this activity to occur. And then in other areas of the city, there's this iconic backdrop piece to it, the Crenshaw Boulevard and down by the Coliseum, et cetera. Continuing on in the location and of analysis of the locations, we have provided the city a list of our best recommendations, and this is working in concert with the Department of Transportation, of locations where we believe that physical interdiction would be effective in keeping people out of these particular intersections. Now, whether or not the haloing effect of just putting environmental controls in these intersections will have impossible to predict. But what we're committed to is working with the Department of Transportation. And in fact, the Commander Valenzuela, who is working at command post today, has a weekly meeting with all of the traffic captains, and the chief engineer of the Department of Engineering or Department of Transportation is a weekly participant in that meeting. So we have high-level exchanges between our traffic captains and the Department of Transportation. And so if the city decides to move forward with plans for physical mitigations, then we will adjust our enforcement efforts to try to curtail any haloing effect that a physical change would make to any one of these intersections that we're recommending. As far as other locations and other cities that have engaged in interdiction activity. So Oakland, California used the hardened centers, the center medians, as their strategy, and that seems to have worked for them. Not a lot of the people that we talk to are as precise at gathering statistics as we are. So a lot of the exchange between our research team and those folks come from the very supervisors like you see here who do the street racing enforcement on a regular engagement. And so a lot of it is anecdotal in its or in the response. But Oakland has felt a reduction in the intersections where they've utilized these and had very little effect on the actual traffic patterns where they're being deployed. Compton, as I had said before, experimented with the bots dots, and that was very ineffective as people actually removed them during, I guess, non-racing hours so as to clear the intersection for the times when the street takeovers occur. In Paramount, California, they went with a strategy of increasing their enforcement. They started to implement several of the strategies that we use here, judicial warrants, to do impoundment of vehicles. Again, they have seen a reduction in their street racing activity in their city, but it's also unclear to them whether or not those folks have just gone to other locations and because of the increased enforcement in Paramount. They did tell us that they impounded in their first initial run 15 vehicles through judicial warrant, and they've been tracking those vehicles specifically, and none of them have been recidivists within the city of Paramount. This is obviously a little bit different than what we have down here. The individual that Ryan's folks arrested for the Christmas murder, if that individual is convicted of murder, and I have every reason to believe that he will be, that will be his 8th conviction related to street racing activity in the county of Los Angeles. Moving on to Portland, Portland also did hardened center lines in their intersections. Unfortunately, Portland was not able to provide us any feedback about how that's going. We just haven't heard back from Portland, but that's where they went with that. Georgia went with another version of increased enforcement and increased tools by increasing fines that are associated with the activity, and they implemented the power to actually seize vehicles as a result of multiple convictions of street racing, and that was in 2001. We're still waiting to hear back from Georgia as to how that has gone. St. Louis and Detroit both went with a diversion type model where they encouraged legal street racing through their own tracks that they have in-house. Mixed results there. They said that it's those that are interested in actually racing cars have no problem following and taking free passes and going and racing on legal tracks. Those that are in it for the social media aspect don't seem to be affected by a legal option. To summarize, the four physical changes that we have uncovered, we talked about hardened center lines, the bots, dots, rumble strips, which you all might be familiar with. Those are the changes, the quick changes in the what's the word I'm looking for, like the I don't know, it's like terrain or but they put divots into the side of the road, so if you fall asleep and you kind of you slide over there, your wheels shake, the inside of your car shakes. So they were talking about the use of rumble strips in the center lines and actually in the roadway. There's not a whole lot of support for that in the engineering community because it would have effect on commercial traffic. The same with the installation of gutters at intersections. There was some discussion about, I can think about in my neighborhood, right near, there's an intersection up just north of Devonshire where it's deceptively deep in the gutter there, and there was some thinking about perhaps lowering some of those water draining gutters in the streets. Again, not a whole lot of support there in the engineering community because of the, not only will it gather water when it does rain, and I guess this year we actually, we had rain, so that would have been a problem. But also there's some real fear about the unsuspecting driver coming along in unpredictably deep gutter, losing control of the vehicle, and it would actually exacerbate the problem during more commuter-friendly hours. Those were the four that we worked with the Department of Transportation at developing. Moving forward, we are going to continue to deploy our street racing task forces as deployment allows. We deploy our street racing task forces based upon when the activity occurs. So generally speaking, they're deployed the Wednesday through Sunday model with some changes in the valley and on the west side based upon what it is that they are tracking. We also have some flexibility based upon actionable intelligence to take SRT-trained officers and either enhance a detail that's happening during a particular weekend or deploy them on overtime if we have actionable intelligence about some kind of activity that's occurring during a non-normally deployed day. We are also working with Metropolitan Division to help us continue to provide training and tactics for the crowd control aspect of these street takeovers. We're talking about crowds of 300, 400, 500 people that will gather into an intersection. And so we are continuously working at improving our tactics, not just for our SRTs. Yesterday during the general staff meeting with all of the command staff, I reintroduced a training video to all of the command staff that had been put out a year ago about the current level of interdiction tactics that we have to be played at roll calls for all patrol officers, because as we approach the summer months, we anticipate that this activity is going to increase. We will continue to work with the Department of Engineering to recommend and help out with their engineering changes. And again, we'll work in concert with our enforcement actions based on their engineering changes. So we will be happy to continue that piece. The installation of cameras. In the discussions that, in the case briefings that I've had with Ryan and with his peer detectives from around the Bureau, Many times, the introduction of cameras or the discovery of video footage has been instrumental in identifying and tracking suspects, especially in these kind of activities where we can go and we can get a judicial warrant and we can impound vehicles after the fact in order to have accountability for vehicles that are being used in this activity. And so I've had discussions with a few of our city councilmen about looking at this list that we had put together for DOT for physical enhancements and utilizing them for camera deployment. Now, the city Department of Transportation has the ATSAC system, and forgive me, I don't remember exactly what that acronym is, but it's a traffic flow camera system. Unfortunately, that would not meet our needs because it doesn't record information. It's very real-time monitoring, so that there isn't a surveillance component to it. It simply identify traffic issues in real time and then respond to them. So we would have to be looking for alternate systems instead of utilizing that system, but we'll continue to pursue that piece. And then the last part of this is a conversation that we had begun, traffic group had begun with the city council about a year ago now with the then city attorney Mike Fuhrer, which the elected leadership for this movement has then since transferred to Councilman Bob Blumenfeld. But that is to actually introduce legislation at the state level to look at the penalties, the definition, and the tools that we have as law enforcement to deal with the street racing phenomenon. When I was a much younger man doing street racing enforcement in the early 2000s up in the valley, the city had implemented an ordinance which allowed the seizure of vehicles that are involved in this activity. There was very highly publicized car crushings as a result of those seizures. And we saw an immediate diminishment in the activity because a lot of times there's a lot of money and there's a lot of self-esteem that's poured into these vehicles, and it's very devastating for their owners to see them up on the car crusher. That particular ordinance, because of a lawsuit, actually unrelated to street racing, a moratorium was recommended by the city attorney on that particular city ordinance, and that moratorium has been in effect since 2008. So we were, and the moratorium exists because the lawsuit cited that that particular, or a subsection of that ordinance was preempted by existing state law. So the solution then would be change state law so that it's not, by definition, there's no preemption, but allowing that tool to be utilized by law enforcement agencies all across the state so that there's no hiding or refuge in other areas of the state from the potential of getting your car seized. So Assemblyman Marisucci has taken up that call, and he has introduced Assembly Bill 74 into the Assembly that has now taken on a 2-year lifespan because of budget issues in Sacramento. And I know Councilman Blumenfeld is still in the process of presenting a resolution to the City Council for the City of Los Angeles to officially adopt that as a lobbying position for the city. And so we're awaiting that resolution to come to council and pass so that we can attempt to pass this message out to other state legislators so that in the 24-25 or the 24 legislative session, when this comes back onto calendar, we could look forward to hopefully getting this passed. And what that bill will do, it will give some more judicial discretion for suspending people's licenses when convicted of street racing offenses. It will give judges the option of impounding vehicles, or depending on the seriousness of the conviction that's related to it, go right to order a seizure of the vehicle by the local, by the arresting agency, and then the destruction of said vehicle for that street racing activity. And that would take place either after a series of convictions, or, like I said, if there's a serious offense, after a single one. And then finally, we are also looking at diversion and other diversionary tactics. So the Irwindale Speedway, they built burn boxes so that people can go up to the Irwindale Speedway and burn out in a safe, controlled manner. And so We are trying to engage in conversations with our local leaders here to bring something a little more closer to Los Angeles, to give options for diversion for a safe and controlled manner to exercise this activity as an option instead of taking over our streets. And with that, I will open it up to any questions that I know you have for my people, because you're done hearing me.
Thank you, Chief Chow. Chief, as you know, as someone who's grown up in Los Angeles, we're a city that's historically built on a car culture. Street racing is in the blood of, I dare say, most of the people that grow up here. I looked at your report. I've studied it. One of the things that I did not call out in it was the number of injuries that occur and deaths that occur from both the street racing and the takeovers. I mean, recently we saw in the news where someone actually caught on fire from somebody spinning out.
Well, they're pouring gasoline on the tires prior to the spinouts so that they can light the whole thing on fire now. Last year in the Los Angeles region, 16 people lost their lives in street racing related activities. I don't have the injury total off the top of my head. I can certainly get that and transmit it through Mr. T-Fank for your review. Actually, I can turn that. Ryan, do you have any?
This work? Can you hear me? Yep. Hello. So some of those numbers are misleading because in the street racing culture, a lot of people that are injured every week. We get a lot of videos. We get social media, what have you. We see people with broken legs. They get flipped by cars, ran over. They don't surface, and they never pop up. So it's never reported. So it's kind of misleading when you're looking at just injuries because we get tons of videos every weekend. One thing we're trying to do, working with the DA's office, is trying to make some of these cases fileable without the victim, because we can identify a lot of the suspects that are involved in some of these things. And you see some stuff that's horrific. I mean, there are some folks that we think that are actually dead. We just haven't been able to find them. I mean, based on what we've watched on video, that some of these collisions that occur, they look like there's no way anybody could survive that. As reference to the person on fire, see, one thing that's happening is in our encounters with a lot of the suspects that we've arrested in some of our bigger high-profile cases, when we interrogate them or in our debriefs, we learn a lot about them and more about like the culture. And it's not just these guys are going out and running around in cars. There's a lot of pride associated with these guys when they're driving these cars and doing their thing, because it actually does take a lot of skill to do what some of these guys do. And so there are people who are pretty well known in this culture that have a lot of followers, and people actually go to some of these events to actually watch them do their thing. And so you got newer folks that are up and coming that want to get their fame. So in instance, when Eliza was killed on Christmas, our suspect Dante, he's a pretty well-known guy. Where he goes, he has a big following. And when he was doing his swinging at the time, that's when the cars were doing donuts. There were two other cars that joined the circle, and he prefers to do solo, go alone, because it's like an ego thing, and he's showing off. That's his moment where people are there to watch him. These other guys, these younger guys that jump in, they realize that there's probably thousands of views that are going to be on Instagram or whatever, so they want to get in there too, so people can say, hey, who's this person in this car, or who's this guy? So it kind of ups their street cred, right? Obviously, unfortunately, in that instance, it went wrong because of a bandit tow. They follow along these groups and they help them if their cars break down, or they help them evade police capture or detection. So if cars, they're there right away to take them out of there. They have police scanners, what have you. But in this case, this bandit tow was going from each takeover to, from one loc to the next loc. And when they were on Crenshaw, for whatever reason, he started getting closer and closer to the pit, to the circle. And when Dante's swinging, there was two other cars swinging with him on his last perimeter or orbit, if you want to call it. He went wider because the third vehicle stalled out. And at the same time, this tow truck was inching forward. So it actually clipped him and sent him off into a straight path. And that's where he went into the crowd of people. He confesses and admits what he did, right? But what was frustrating for him was that once his car was struck, I believe he was in a Camaro,
all the airbags, everything deployed, and he was unable to steer the vehicle, and it was just going and nothing was working because it was like it was in a collision. So it just goes into the crowd of people without him being able to stop it. So what's great and kind of unique about this case, we've been working with Jesse Garcia and Castellanos, all these guys from CTD, other divisions, kind of seeing that this is going to happen at one point because my guys over in South Traffic, we get a lot of these reports. And so we already started working with these guys on, we're basically trying to figure out how to do more with less right now, right? Because we always, I'm sure everybody comes in here, we need more officers, we need more people. So we try to strengthen our numbers by helping out sometimes with these guys and working together. So when this happened, and I guess that we're looking for a detective with detective lenses on, this is it's like a crime scene, right? So you look at from the beginning, from when the first person gets to this intersection and starts orchestrating, blocking it, and everybody shows up. And that's kind of the picture you have to paint with the district attorney's office to get a filing, especially for a murder, right, on a case like this. So what we ended up doing in this case, which was significant for this whole thing, is that everybody involved is facing murder. Even the tow truck driver that clipped the car, they're all getting the same penalty as Dante, which is murder. So that's kind of rare and unique because that hasn't happened before anywhere. And it's the trend that we're going to do on the next one that happens, and the next one that everybody involved is going to get, they're going to get their piece of the pie. And what's great is that we actually have the support from the district attorney's office in doing so. So a lot of it when we're approaching this, it's kind of funny because we'll go at it sometimes, and I think that's Lieutenant Jesse Garcia, who's around a lot of times with the street racing stuff. But we come in from a detective side, so these guys are more like patrol. So we don't butt heads, but we kind of wait, what are you talking about? What do you look at? And I look at it hey, there's other things that we can do to help out to try to lessen the participation, I guess you want to call it. And when we talk to other cities, other states where it's kind of been successful, as Chief Graham was kind of pointing out, one thing that we kind of talk about and we like to see maybe happen in the future is back in the day, I'm an old gang guy. I used to work crash way back in the day at Southeast when we used to be the crash unit. We eventually started having gang injunctions, right? And I know that's not a thing right now, gang injunctions, but what I'd like to see would be great is these intersections that we've identified as problematic where these takeovers happen every weekend, is that we could somehow make, so in a gang injunction, we would designate a certain area because of the amount of problems and crime, a safety zone, right? So if we were able to designate and call some of these intersections a safety zone, and on certain days, so Wednesday through Sunday evening, through certain hours of the evening, if the fines are stricter or double or triple, if they are doing things as far as blocking the traffic, doing whatever, and just designate not people or any group of persons, but an actual intersection as a safety zone to help us kind of, I think what has to happen is we have to focus also on obviously the swingers, the guys that go around and spin, but the people that they're spectating, because if they're not there to watch and block all the traffic, then these guys don't have their audience, and they're not going to be able to do what they do. So it's one strategy we're talking about out of many to just go back to the drawing board. But yeah, we're just like our chief was saying too. Cameras would be the probably most crucial, best piece of tool we can use right now to help also combat this.
Chief Graham, and I apologize if I misnamed you. One thing that struck me is you indicated that social media plays a large part in this. It incentivizes a lot of these folks because it monetizes their joyride, their thrill, and spinning out in the street. How do we disincentivize that? Is this TikTok? Is it Instagram? Is it both?
It's all of them. It's all of them. You can find YouTube. In fact, we had a fairly extensive complaint from a member of the public who continuously sees this and all of this activity happening on YouTube, and is just stunned that there's all this what they're interpreting as evidence available for open source, and there's no prosecutions on individuals who are purveying this information because they're not private about who they are; they're very public about who they are. But again, I think this is a political leadership piece. This is a political will piece about whether they can convince through corporate citizenship in the owners of these social media empires to make that policy. We're not going to allow the monetization of illegal activity being depicted on our platforms.
So basically, you want TikTok to stop paying these folks who are street racing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that the effect of the activity will be profound. I know Chief
We're
Moore
actually
has,
on the record asking for that.
Chief Moore has sent, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please, go ahead.
Yeah, Chief Moore has sent letters to all of the major platforms that we have, and has encouraged the law enforcement executives, local and I'm sure across the state, to do the same. In our conversations with legislators about their socialization of AB 74 and in getting somebody to bite and sponsor this legislation, which is this is part of that conversation. I just want to really quickly circle back to a comment you made about that this is part of the culture. We recognize that. And so instead of calling for stiffer penalties or a felony that would hang over a young person's head for the rest of their life, because I think in the 90th percentile of the people that we arrest are under 26 that we cite or arrest for this activity. And so these are young people decisions. They're not good ones, but they're young people decisions. And so part of the push of AB 74 is not the permanency of a felony on your record, but the removal of your ability to cause danger to the public, which is the seizure of the vehicle. Right? We want to give them diversion. We want to give them an opportunity to sit down and cool themselves and think about it while their car has been impounded for 30 days. But if you get your car out of impound after 30 days and you go right back to it, then you can't have nice things. And I think it's time for, I think it's in the community interest to remove excuse the pun, the vehicle of their destruction from their possession.
Makes sense. Thank you. Commissioner Suthers.
Thank you, Chief. So it appears you certainly have overwhelming data here to support a pilot if you were going to do one at intersections that could be prioritized. Is there anybody in the state, I'll start with that is using this hybrid method of the cameras that you suggested, not for traffic flow, but to capture the vehicle that's engaged in the activity, then going out later and seizing and impounding that vehicle, regardless of who was driving it at the time?
So we are actually involved in a multi-agency task force in the metropolitan area that these gentlemen work with all the time, where other municipalities are engaging in that same activity, other municipalities and the Sheriff's Department and the California Highway Patrol. So I think that the trend that our detectives have started in trying to find a way to push back against this activity has been taking hold. There are some challenges. Some of the challenges is the way the current state law is written. This is only a sanction against the registered owner of the vehicle. And so there are registered legal owner games that are played on regular participants in this activity. So we'll go out, we'll do the warrant, we'll get the car comes back, and then some other person we've never seen before shows up and say, but that's my car. And then we would be then forced to release that car to that individual. So AB 74 would take care of closing some of those loopholes to be able to do, or to be able to disguise the ownership of the vehicle and actually hold the vehicle accountable. This actually stemmed from a conversation that we had with the abatement folks at the city attorney's office about the nuisance aspect of this, and that if you're a property owner of real property in the city and your lack of care for your property causes a community impact, a negative community impact, then the city can impose sanctions upon you that up to including forfeiting your property. So it would be simply a matter of applying that legal principle to chattel instead of real property, which is something that the city attorney's office was looking at. But then the faster way to get there would be actual changes in the vehicle code that would facilitate that. It's still an option, and I know that there's been some changes, obviously, in the leadership of the city attorney's office, but and it's a conversation I'm willing to re-engage with them again, just to give us different options on how to do that.
And thank you. Just really quick, how long have you been able to hold a vehicle when you've impounded it as a result of identifying it through the camera?
Maximum of 30 days.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Suthers. Commissioner Shields.
question about the DOT system for traffic flow. Is that something that LAPD actually has access to? Is it outside of your control?
It's outside of our control. In fact, it's the grant that allows that prohibits law enforcement access to those cameras.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shields. Commissioner Soboroff.
Yeah, these are basically pop-ups. They happen fast. They're coordinated. These guys know how much time before. Is it an hour? I mean, the guys who are sitting there in charge of this.
Sergeant Castellanos, sir.
2 hours?
No. A lot of times they'll plan a certain time. They'll say, hey, look, we're going to kick off at this time at 7 p.m. at night. Normally, they'll set a time to start. They'll have an initial meeting point, and then from there, it could be a matter of minutes. So, for example, this past weekend, we had broke up a takeover in the area of Jefferson Figueroa. Within 5 minutes, they were at 6th and Mateo.
Okay, and so how, I think that answers the second question. How long does it take you to disrupt these things? And if they know you can disrupt really quickly, that'll throw them for a loop, right?
It goes twofold. We have two ways of disrupting them. Either, a lot of times when patrol and other aspects come in, their goal is to abate the program and abate the activity and just have them pushed out of the area. What that does is just push it onto the next.
It's just whack-a-mole when you do that? Yeah.
So the difference with the SRT teams and the trap task force is we actually go in and we actually stop these cars. Undercover detectives identify the swingers that are seen, and these vehicles are now actually, the owners are cited, all the spectators are cited, and the vehicles are impounded for 30 days. So they know, the individuals that go to these events, when they see the street racing task force, that there's a high probability that they're going to get stopped and the cars.
So if there are 10 Wizards of Oz, okay, doing this, I don't know if there's just one or there's 50, but let's say there's 10. How linked in are you to them? As soon as they do step one, which is to set a time, how linked in are you to let all those people know that, hey, we're on here too?
If I can, sir, in this forum, it's not something I really want them to discuss.
Okay.
But suffice it to say that we have various methods of attempting to glean the information from them so that we can get ahead of them as far as.
So you're telling the Wizards of Oz here that you're on to them and that they should be doing something else. Is that what
He's
you're saying?
specifically not saying that.
I think we are saying that we're on to this activity and we don't want it.
And Commissioner,
We're
it's
gonna do
well
everything
known.
possible.
Commissioner, it's well known. This is a phenomenon of a cat and mouse game, and there's countermeasures that are already employed regularly. There, as we've evolved our tactics, they're evolving them. I think the underlying core issue with this is a platform that promotes and facilitates this type of conduct. It makes no attempt to shield or hide itself from its illegality, from its efforts to thwart law enforcement, from its efforts to conspire to conduct these operations and then cover up or obscure those involved from law enforcement and them being held accountable. So this is again where it's a club. It is, to your point earlier, Bob's Big Boy, Van Nuys Boulevard, circa 1950. I wasn't there, but I heard about it. But the techniques today, in technology today have amplified exponentially on every level. The equipment, the dangerousness of these vehicles, the impact it has on loss of life has always occurred, but now it's glorified with on the movies to the 10th degree with the most recent release. And so our efforts I congratulate the team and the ongoing efforts to try to build a better mousetrap, and I welcome the continued work that they're engaged in at the detective level. I think a safety zone that you've talked about is a perfect idea in the sense of it's an evolution. Let's try it. Just as we have construction zones and fines are doubled, we should have and consider these areas. The impact on the communities are severe. Whether you serve as a backdrop to the Fast and Furious, and people are now going in front of your home and orchestrating these matters for publicity, or you happen upon a situation where people are fleeing and they're crashing and so forth. So these are real consequences. Our work continues. It's by no means we have, as we just reported this weekend, as the summer months come on, we expect this only to increase. While we've seen some temperament of changing it, It is by no means, we're no means ahead of the game here with the loss of life, but we're not gonna give up, and I know they're not, and that's why the resources that are deployed, as scarce as they are, they earn their keep threefold by their assignments to this task force.
Can I add to the sergeant real quick what he said? So he just actually said it. So one of the things that always gets overlooked in this is street racing, with the street races is that, or the takeovers, the takeover is dangerous itself, but people are watching, spectating, and the cars are swinging. But one of the most dangerous things that actually happens at these events that never gets spoken about is when one location gets broken up and when the whole pack goes to the next location. Like Sarge just said, Jefferson Figueroa was broken up, and then within 5-10 minutes, they were at 6 in Mateo. You know how long it takes to get there that quick? And you're talking hundreds of cars driving the wrong side of the road, running red lights, stop signs. And so that is what our fight is for cameras, because in speaking with the city attorney's office and the district attorney, if we're able to identify these cars at, like, let's say location 1, then they go to location 2, and we're able to identify them, and we could start getting these other cars that are not participating as far as swingers, but they're just the spectators, what have you. So that's one of our pushes for cameras, because we can be able to kind of document more of what's actually happening in the way it's described in court. For court purposes, the event's just not, if there was 10 takeovers in one night from like the same pack, it's not just 1 or 2, it's the whole, from the very first one that started to the last one at 3 in the morning, is all one basically event with different parts of it. So anyways, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief Graham. Thank you, all of you, for being here. This presentation shows that hopefully that we're not playing whack-a-mole, and that we can come to some resolution, and that City Council will take some action, much-needed action here. So to that extent, I move that we approve the department's report and transmit it to City Council. Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to be in closed session.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss items number 5A1 and 5A2 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Commission has concluded its work in closed session. The executive director will report out.
Item 5A1, K-9 contact number 032-22. Chief's recommendation was adopted on a 3-0 vote. K-9 deployment consistent with the established criteria. K-9 contact consistent with established criteria. Post K-9 contact procedures consistent with established criteria. Let the record reflect for this particular case and vote, Commissioner Briggs was not present. Item 5A2, officer involved shooting number 034-22. Commission unanimously on a 4-0 vote adopted the recommendation of the Chief of Police, which were tactics, tactical debrief, 1 Sergeant 1, administrative disapproval, 1 Police Officer 2, drawing and exhibiting in policy, 1 Sergeant 1, 1 Police Officer 2, lethal use of force in policy, 1 Sergeant 1. That concludes the report out.
Okay, thank you, Executive Director T. May we have a motion to adjourn?
I second.
Motion's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.